Good morning. I'll call to order the public meeting, Arapahoe County Board of County Commissioners public meeting today, May 16th, 2017, 9:30 a.m. And Commissioner Baker, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And to my left is Ron Carl, County Attorney. To my right is Jolene Sanchez, Assistant Clerk to the Board. Ms. Sanchez, would you call the roll of the board, please?
Commissioner Jackson?
Here.
Commissioner Holland is absent and excused. Okay. Commissioner Conti? Good morning. Commissioner Baker?
Here.
And Commissioner Sharp?
Here. Mr. Carl, are there any modifications to the agenda this morning?
There are no modifications today.
We have one set of minutes to approve, April 25th, 2017, and Commissioner Baker was absent and excused. I'll entertain a motion for approval. So moved. Motion made by Commissioner Jackson, seconded by Commissioner Conti. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One abstention. And meeting minutes are approved. We now have a citizen comment period for anyone who would like to speak during the public comment period on anything that is not currently on the agenda. Okay, seeing no one, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda as presented. Sorry, I forgot to turn my mic on.
I'll make the motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. Motion made by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Jackson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. We have a page here. Four public hearing items today, and our attorney is Mr. Robert Hill, Senior Assistant County Attorney. And the first one is Dove Valley 5 Broncos Parkway Plaza USR Second Amendment, and that is case U16-004. Mr. Hill, would you set the foundation, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This use by special review application has been noticed for public hearing as required under the Land Development Code. The board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you. And our presenter is Molly Orkild Larson. Ms. Larson.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Molly Orkild Larson, Senior Planner with the Public Works Department. What's before you this morning is an amendment to the Broncos Parkway Plaza use by special review. The Broncos Parkway Plaza development is located at the southwest corner of South Jordan Road and East Broncos Parkway. This amendment proposes to allow automotive uses on Lot 2 of this development. The automotive use proposed on Lot 2 is a car wash, which is presently being reviewed through the administrative site plan process. The Landera neighborhood, which is the neighborhood to the east of the subject development, voiced some concern to the proposed use, including noise, headlights pointing towards the homes, hours of operation, traffic, and trash. The applicant did meet with the Homeowners Association and has seemed to address these concerns. Staff has set a condition of approval that the applicant address all the comments and concerns specified by the Ladera Homeowners Association through the administrative site plan review process. This condition can be found in the draft motions in your packets. Based on the findings of the staff report, staff is recommending approval with conditions. This concludes my presentation. If you have any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer any of them. And the applicant is also here to answer any questions.
Have any questions or questions of the applicant? I just had one question, and that was, and maybe you're not, maybe the applicant would know, is why were automotive uses excluded in the first place?
That would have to be directed towards the applicant.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think that's the only one I had.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, Mr. Armstrong. If you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Greg Armstrong. I'm with Armstrong Capital Development. We office at 4643 South Ulster Street, Denver, in the Tech Center, 80237, I believe. And I'd like to clarify a couple things, and then I will address your question specifically. But there are actually two applicants. The applicant standing before you today is here to amend the existing USR by virtue of the addition of the car wash use to Lot 2. There are 6 commercial lots on the property. 3 are on the frontage, 3 are off of Jordan Road. The car use was actually permitted on a number of the lots. At the time, it was a random selection as to who would go where, not knowing who would go where. And so the only 2 remaining lots that are currently undeveloped are Lot 5 and Lot 2. Lot 5 is a permitted car wash use. Lot 2 is not. The buyer happens to prefer Lot 2. And so hence the amendment today to amend the USR. The concerns raised by the homeowners and through the normal ASP process, we do believe have been addressed. My associate, Kathy Sorensen, did attend the meeting, and she can attest to that if necessary, but the receptivity to the car wash uses and that applicant's responses to their concerns seem to be right on point and right on target. That said, that applicant still needs to complete its own ASP process, which would be a follow-on to today's hearing. So we're here before you today to look to amend the USR. The applicant, whose project we have reviewed from the Architectural Control Committee perspective, Owners Association for the Broncos Association, finds it to be pretty nice for what it is. I mean, it's a good-looking facility, and we actually have yet to complete that architectural control review process, and we'll probably push a few more of their buttons before we're all said and done. But as owners ourselves out there, we're interested in maintaining a high level of quality. So thank you, and if there are any other questions, I'm happy to address them.
Mr. Jackson.
So just to clarify, the issues of lights and hours and possible noises have been addressed with the applicant and HOA?
Yes, to the best of our knowledge. I mean, the applicant appeared at the annual Homeowners Association, correct? And at that meeting, it was on the agenda. And it came up as an agenda item, and the homeowners who were present at the annual meeting, who of course have been notified through the standard protocols, talked about it and concluded that they really didn't have that many issues. And I think there was nothing ever forthcoming by way of written issues, I guess, or complaints, as far as we know. So the applicant may have something else that we're unaware of, but at this point, that's all we know.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Armstrong, other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this issue? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And I'll make a motion here in the case of U16-004 Broncos Parkway Plaza Use by Special Review Amendment. The county commissioners have read the staff report including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation. And we didn't have any public comment here, but have read some public comment that has come to us as presented. I hereby move to approve this application based on the findings in the staff report, subject to the following conditions. 1, prior to signature of the final Mylar copy of the use by special review amendment exhibit, the applicant agrees to address the Planning Commission, Mapping Division, Zoning Division, and Engineering Services Division comments and concerns as outlined in their reports. 2, prior to commencement of construction on Lot 2, the applicant agrees to address all requirements specified by the Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Authority. 3, prior to commencement of construction on Lot 2, the applicant agrees to address all comments and concerns specified by the Ladera HOA through the administrative site plan review process. And 4, prior to the signature of final Mylar copy of the use by special review amendment exhibit, the applicant agrees to update the City of Centennial boundaries on the vicinity map. And that's my motion. I'll ask for a second.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Sharp, seconded by Commissioner Jackson. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. And we'll move on to our second public hearing case, which is case P16-030, Copperleaf number 17, final plat. And our presenter is Bill Skinner, Senior Planner, Public Works and Development. Welcome, Mr. Skinner. Oh, and foundation. Mr. Hill, would you set the foundation,
thank you.
please?
This final plat application has been noticed in accordance with the Land Development Code. The board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Skinner?
Bill Skinner for the Planning Division. In P16030, the final plat in Copperleaf. It's generally southeast of the corner of Quincy and Piccadilly. The owner wants to take a parcel, a 6.14 acre parcel, and divide it into 5 lots with a supporting tracks for an access road to the south of the parcels, and then one road that splits up kind of through the middle of them to access Quincy. Being a statutory county and plats being a technical document, really we look at them to see if they're proper and correct. In the Mapping Division thinks they are so. The Planning Division looks at compatibility issues. Are the lots sized in a way that would pose problems for the surrounding properties? And we do not find them to be so. So the staff recommendation is approval with conditions. The owner's here to speak if you'd like to speak to him, and I'm here for questions if you'd like to speak to me.
Thank you, Mr. Skinner. Questions? Okay. Would you like to hear from the applicant? Oh, Commissioner Jackson.
As I was reviewing this, I just found something that I had a question about. So I believe I'm on the right page. We have a billion pages today. But it says that they're going to reduce the 40-foot setback to 20 feet.
Next case.
Next case. Okay, hold that thought.
Please, Commissioner.
Hold that thought.
That will be the preliminary development plan case.
Okay, then never mind. Thank you. I knew I was getting lost in my documents.
For the Commissioner's comfort, we are actually talking about the same piece of ground, just 2 different applications.
Would you like to hear from the applicant on this case? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Skinner. I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on case 16-030, Copperleaf number 14, final plat? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion. If we can find it.
16-0030.
Yeah.
I have page 121.
Okay.
Almost there. Commissioner Baker.
In the case of P16-030 Copperleaf filing number 14 final plat, we've read the staff reports and received testimony at the public hearing. I agree with the Planning Commission recommendation. staff findings for the application, including all plans and attachments as set forth in the staff report dated May 9th, 2017. I hereby move to approve the request subject to the following conditions. 1. Prior to signature of the final copy of these plans, the applicant agrees to address Public Works staff comments and concerns. 2. The applicant will provide a water supply plan to the Colorado Division of Water Resources.
Motion made by Commissioner Baker. Is there a second? Seconded made by Commissioner Conti. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Our next public hearing is case Z16-009, Copperleaf PDP Third Amendment. And Mr. Hill, would you set the foundation, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This case for preliminary development plan, Third Amendment, has been properly noticed, again in accordance with the Land Development Code and applicable statute. The board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Skinner?
Commissioners, Bill Skinner again for the Planning Division. In Z16006, this is an amendment to the existing and approved Copperleaf Preliminary Development Plan. Copperleaf Preliminary Development Plan, fairly large PDP, located generally southwest of the intersection of Quincy and E470. This is a very narrowly focused request. The 3 points in the staff report are pretty specific. There's additional direction pertaining to Section 5.27 signage. We'll let the applicant talk about that briefly. Point 2, that direction is going to help the monumentation sign being proposed eventually be more consistent with the Copperleaf neighborhood development signs, the development identification signs. And point 3, which is what I think Commissioner Jackson was asking about, there are, in Copperleaf, the setbacks along arterial and collector, in other words, on the larger, higher capacity roads, are unique to those roads, as opposed to a setback where we just say front, side, rear, and give numbers. Here there are specific call-outs along those roads. Copperleaf was approved and proposed before a lot of the development on the north side of Quincy was proposed. This request asks that the setbacks along 3 specific roadways, Copperleaf Boulevard, East Quincy Avenue, and Piccadilly, be reduced from 40 to 20 feet. That would pertain to structures, uses, and parking. We didn't see a problem with it as staff. I mean, granted, planning is generally of a mind to have bigger setbacks unless we're really shooting for high density. In this situation, we didn't see any difficulties with this reduction. Having looked at some of the things on the north side of the road and what's in the city of Aurora, it'll make the Quincy corridor more consistent. So staff recommendation was recommend for approval with conditions. We do want you to hear from the applicant, though, because they provide their own justifications where staff would not go out and do that on their behalf.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, the reason I asked that was because of my concern about other jurisdictions that have seems very small, short setbacks, and then when you want to widen the road, and my guess is that Quincy being a really major road, it will have to be widened at some point. So I want to make sure we have enough space there in terms of setback and easements so that we don't have buildings or parking lots or whatever right at the edge of the road. So I wonder if you could just talk about that a little bit.
I actually recommend that we ask engineering about that. They're here and they have a much better handle on the transportation plan and the eventual build out for Quincy than I would.
Mr. Skinner, how did the Planning Commission vote on this? Do you know? Did it go before the Planning Commission?
Yes, it did go before the Planning Commission, and they were a 7-0 for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Skinner.
Let's hear it from engineering.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Spencer Smith with Engineering Services. Quincy has a 144-foot ultimate right-of-way along that area, and that right-of-way, in this case, has been secured with some additional public use easement along the Copperleaf frontage there that does account for the ultimate laneage, curb and gutter, sidewalk, the landscape strip. So that area has been set aside for any future ultimate build-out. Like I said, that includes sidewalk and landscaping and everything else.
Mr. Jackson.
So the 20-foot setback is in addition to all those easements that may or may not be eventually utilized by roads and sidewalks and who knows what else, bike lanes, and because bicyclists love that road. So there would be sufficient room in that corridor, if you will, for all that.
Correct. Yes, that would be in addition to that ultimate right-of-way width.
Okay. And so they won't have to start carving into that 20.
Not as Quincy is, that section, that typical section is set aside and determined in the transportation plan as kind of the ultimate build out. So barring any kind of a change to that, that would be, a fairly major change to any transportation plan or anything. What's been planned is accounted for in that.
Okay. And can you just tell me quickly, and maybe this is Bill, and maybe it's the applicant, I don't know, is what caused that change? Why is it that it needed to change? I'm just curious about that. Was it a change in design or just...
You're asking about that setback change that they're asking for?
A more efficient use of the land. I don't know.
Let's ask the applicant about that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Skinner? Okay. We will ask the applicant.
Good morning. My name is Tim Nelson. I'm the senior planner with Galloway and Company out of 6162 South Willow Drive in Greenwood Village, Colorado. I'm here to address your questions. Real quick, this application is really just a clarification to update to more current conditions. There are three components to the PDP amendment. There's the first component, which is detailed in your staff report, which is the a tweaking of the wording of the original sign calculation in the original PDP. It's really just calculating the signage as opposed to any architectural treatment around that signage, and that it brings it to more of a current way of calculating signage and allows for some of the national retailers that are looking at this site to do what they would typically do. You've heard on one of your consent agenda items was one of the users for the site, which was Maverick Fuel, and allows for their canopy signage. And we've been working with staff to make sure that that's consistent with the county's codes, consistent with the area in the neighborhood, and the signage just brings it a little bit more into current language. I'm
sorry, just apologize for interrupting. Just to make sure that this is the PDP Third Amendment Z16-009, that all of your comments are.
That is correct.
Reflect toward this one.
That is correct. Okay, and there's really three components of it: the signage clarification, how to calculate the square footage, the monument sign, allowing for the monument sign to be consistent with what Copperleaf has already developed, and then the third component is the setback, which is the going from a 40-foot setback to a 20-foot setback. And really what that is it's making it consistent with the other three corners of the four-corner intersection of Quincy and Piccadilly. If you recall the neighborhood market to the northwest of this site, that has a 20-foot setback off of Quincy and Piccadilly. If you look at immediately to the north of our site, that has a 20-foot setback, and then to the west of us. The right-of-way, Copperleaf was way ahead of the times with regard to this corridor, Quincy and Piccadilly. They entered into a joint venture between the cities and the county to do the 6-lane arterial through this area long before it was ever needed. And so that's already built. And so you heard from engineering. The right-of-way that is currently in the possession of the county will accommodate any future plans for Quincy that we can foresee in our, in the future of planning. So the setbacks are no longer an issue. From a retailer standpoint, from a use standpoint, what they're finding is that the people that are interested in the site want to be consistent with the other four corners of the intersection and match that same setback. So that's really what's driving this amendment to the PDP. One last point, just to clarify your question, this did go in front of Planning Commission on May 2nd, and it was a 7-0 vote in favor of this application. So.
Any further questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on case, turn back over here, sorry, Z16-009 Copperleaf PDP Third Amendment? Okay, seeing none, I will, whoops. Yes, ma'am, come on down. You want to come down to the mic, please, and if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record.
My name is Kathleen Butke. I live at 24706 East Saratoga Place in Aurora, Colorado, and that's in Tollgate Crossing. Okay, I don't know anything about what they're proposing here. I was just looking on the map, but my question is, I'm looking at Piccadilly, and then you're coming into where E470 is widening down there. What are the plans for the road on Quincy to get up to 6, and how will it affect them?
Okay.
6 lanes.
All right.
Right now it's not.
All right. Thank you. We have someone that could, engineering, that can address that question.
Good morning, Board. Chuck Haskins, representing Engineering Services Division. I believe the question was relative to the widening of Quincy closer to E470. The county has received federal funding on that project and is cooperating with the city of Aurora, CDOT, and E470 to accommodate the widening for 6 lanes under E470. And improvements to the Gun Club intersection. They're looking at a continuous flow intersection. This project is moving forward with design, and I don't have a construction schedule yet, but it is moving forward. So I hope that addresses the question.
Thank you, Mr. Haskins.
Thank you.
So they're meshed correctly?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the current widening of Quincy will continue. And there is a bit of an abrupt merge there right now because of the narrower section. But yeah, it will align with what the widened section of Quincy.
Thank you. Okay. I think that would be the only public comment. I will again close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Conti.
Thank you. In the case of Z16-009, I would move for approval of Copperleaf PDP Third Amendment. I have read the staff report and received the testimony of the public hearing. I agree with the Planning Commission recommendations, staff findings for the application, including all plans and attachments as set forth in the staff report dated April 25th, 2017. I hereby move to approve the request subject to the following conditions. 1, prior to the signature of the final copy of these plans, that the applicant agrees to address Public Works staff comments and concerns.
Second. Motion made by Commissioner Conti, seconded by Commissioner Baker. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. We have one final public hearing, is case ASI 16-004, Pawnee Daniels 345K transmission line and substation, and this is a 1041 permit hearing. And Mr. Hill, would you set the foundation, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this application for a 345K transmission line and substation brought pursuant to the county's 1041 regulations has been noticed by publication, posting at multiple locations, and by mailing to adjacent property owners in accordance with the 1041 regulations, and the board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you. Our presenter is Mr. Skinner, Senior Planner, Public Works and Development. Mr. Skinner.
Bill Skinner for the Planning Division. The 1041 proposal is part of a much larger power line installation. The part that's in the county, you have probably noticed from the staff report, involves a substation, and at that point, that's in unincorporated Arapahoe County's jurisdiction. The lines will move south through a corridor that's in the city of Aurora's jurisdiction, and then we pick up approximately 1.8 miles of transmission line corridor that is again in the county's jurisdiction towards the southern edge of the county, running north to south. Big utility installations are always a bit of a give and a take, and in this case, staff reviewed the 1041 for correctness and completeness. We found it to be so. We weighed the location of this installation and the fact that the substation is going on new land acquired by Excel is one, for us, sub-issue. The second issue is the transmission lines. Staff was appreciative of the fact that they are going in an existing transmission line corridor. They haven't asked to carve a new corridor. Now, we understand that that increases the impact on that corridor, but weighing things out, slightly more intensive use on a corridor, considering lines exist, lines are on existing towers, the new lines will not be on bigger towers or pose a drastic increase or a new type of impact in that corridor. We thought that weighed favorably in this application, all things considered. So the staff position has been for support and approval with conditions. We do have a modification to the proposed conditions of approval. Condition number 6 says Excel will provide the same level of corridor improvements within the unincorporated territory of Arapahoe County along the transmission line corridor as they agreed to provide for adjacent sections of the Pawnee Daniels Park transmission line corridor within the city of Aurora jurisdiction. That was a condition brought forth by one of the planning commissioners. We understand what they were looking for. The planning staff worked with the county's open space department and found out that the open space department was already in discussions with Excel about how to handle trails and improvements in that transmission line corridor. And we haven't seen the contents of any agreement between Excel and the city of Aurora yet. We're a little cautious about a condition that ties us to a document we don't understand at this time. And we feel like perhaps Condition 7 would get that planning commission or what he was going for with Condition 6 anyway. So staff is cautiously recommending that the board consider removing Condition 6. We think we've accomplished all the goals with Condition 7, and being that it's the open space department that's negotiating that agreement, we'd rather leave it in their hands to work out the agreement they want to see instead of tie us to an unknown agreement we haven't had a chance to review yet.
Okay, Commissioner Jackson.
I have a puzzled look on my face.
You do indeed.
Because I am puzzled. I guess what we do is we ask open space if they have an agreement. I mean, somehow or other, a question is going to come up around the maintenance of this territory, if you will, and who's going to do what, and what are the quality assurances, if you will. So does Condition 7 take care of that, or do we need to talk to open space somewhere along here? I see that they're here. I'm glad that they are. Are we going to have to talk to them about where we are with this? Because I really don't want to just leave it like, well, something will happen.
I understand, and I appreciate the position. Yes, let's do talk to open space briefly. In the days between the writing of this report and these conditions and today's hearing, Excel and open space have continued the conversation and made progress. So, I would really enjoy for the commissioners to hear where we're at with that now.
Okay, any other questions?
Madam Chair, just for clarification, I just want to, you are talking about Aurora open space, not Arapahoe County open space, correct?
Oh, a fair. Yeah, that could have been clearer in that condition. The Arapahoe County's Open Space Department is in negotiations with Excel for some kind of an agreement about trail improvements in the corridor that's in the Arapahoe County jurisdiction. At the Planning Commission, we heard reference to an agreement between the City of Aurora and Excel. County has no involvement in that. That's the agreement referred to in Condition 6. That's the unknown at the moment that we're recommending caution about.
Commissioner Baker.
Mr. Skinner, you mentioned that there's really two parts to this. One is the transmission line corridor, and the other one, will there be a presentation by the applicant?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and the other part of it is the substation that's in unincorporated Arapahoe County to the north of tollgate crossing housing area, which is in Aurora,
right,
but south of Quincy,
right,
correct? And the transmission lines is about 1.8 miles of 125-mile project altogether.
The portion that's in unincorporated Arapahoe County is 1.8.
So that's what we would be approving or denying is 1.8 mile section of the transmission line, correct?
Yes, and the right to go in and do a substation.
And the substation.
The details of which were handled in a location and extent approval with the Planning Commission. But by no means does that approval tie the board's hands with a 1041 approval. We wanted to make sure you don't feel stuck on that matter. They're separate applications. I mean, they go to the same project, but one does not directly require the other to be approved.
Mr. Baker.
And one follow-up, since you mentioned the Planning Commission, because they approved the location and extent, that doesn't come to us.
Correct.
Correct. And then how did the Planning Commission vote on the 1041?
I don't have that in my board summary report, but we will get that answer and bring it to you before you make a motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Skinner? Could we have somebody from Open Space talk to us a little bit about the trail and... Thank you, Mr. Skinner.
Hi, good morning. I'm Roger Harvey, the planning administrator for Arapahoe County Open Spaces. So, I can give you a little background on the communication that I've had with Excel. We've been looking at a trail corridor in this area for quite some time, even before my time with Arapahoe County. And we were looking at the Lowry Trust property, and that one, with development so far off, Lowry Trust had kind of directed us to the Excel property because they were in negotiations with them on the purchase of this corridor. The corridor I'm really referring to is between Gun Club and Harvest Road. It's about 1 mile long. And we're really been working, in accordance with our open space master plan and a lot of other planning documents and citizen feedback we've received to get trail users from basically the west side of E470 Copperleaf area to the fairgrounds and to Aurora Reservoir. There's really no off-street connections right now, so this is something we've been directed through planning and feedback to try to accomplish this. As Chuck Haskins mentioned, we're working with Public Works on this Quincy Glen Club intersection improvements. currently slated to do an underpass that'll bring trail users off street to the east side of Gun Club Road. From that point, that's where we've been kind of at an impasse where to go, because the Quincy widening project out to Powhatan is really, I've heard about 2027 possibly. So this is a great opportunity to work with Excel on using a trail corridor along these utility lines. We did have a conversation at a pre-submittal meeting back in 2015 where Excel was very positive about this trail corridor. Communication kind of fell off from there, and that's unfortunately why we were unable to go to the Planning Commission with this request. I actually just happened to notice that after the fact of Planning Commission approval on the L&E and the 1041, and that's why we're kind of coming now with this condition. I'm really not aware of what Aurora's condition was, where Planning Commission had put that in. Unfortunately, I would have liked to have gone to that Planning Commission meeting, but I didn't know about it. But right now, I mean, I have discussed this yesterday, exchanged voicemails with Derek from Excel, and they are very positive about trail alignment through the corridor. We just aren't very far along in the conversations about what this alignment will look like, where exactly it will go along this corridor, what the width would be. But we would be more than, from Open Spaces perspective, we would design this, we would work on an alignment with the consultant, we would build it, and we would maintain it. One of the things I know Excel, Derek had left a voicemail about, doing some possible partnership in landscaping along the substation. I believe that they have to do some landscaping buffer for Tollgate community to the south. And that's something that we could look at partnering with to help maintain that landscaping for them, because obviously we'll be maintaining the trail corridor, so it's something we could look at doing too. So I could entertain any other questions you might have.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson.
So, can you help me understand, are we thinking about a trail that kind of goes under those or very close to those power lines? And if so, I'm always a little sensitive about I know and I've had conversations with Excel about whether electromagnetic fields and so on, but it's my understanding that, and certainly if I'm a hiker or a biker who's interested in being outdoors, a mile underneath a power line, is that what's being considered? And is that, in your mind, any kind of problem?
Well, I'm not sure. Like I said, we'd have to look at the alignment. I don't think it would go directly under their towers and the lines. I think maybe to the north or south, possibly, and that's something we'll continue to look at with Excel and where that corridor could be. And we just haven't communicated enough and looked at what the width is and where the actual location would be. And that's kind of why in the condition we kind of thought it would be a 2-year process as they're building this out. We would look, what's the best location? What works for Excel? What works for us? What works for users? What works for everybody involved, kind of thing.
Right, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Okay. I'll ask the applicant to come up. And if you state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, good morning. My name is Derek Holscher. I'm with Excel Energy and the Siting and Land Rights Group. Address is 1800 Larimer Street, Denver, Colorado, 80202. And I'd be happy to kind of address some of the questions that came up from the Open Space Director. It's pretty typical in our transmission line corridors that we do this kind of development trails and of the such. We have actually with us today a typical license agreement form. If you'd like to review that, we have that, which is used throughout a lot of our transmission line corridors in the metro area. It kind of sets forth the responsibility and maintenance issues with the jurisdiction or whoever we're entering that license agreement with. As far as addressing your issue on EMF, electromagnetic fields, we designed these lines to be well below the state mandate of 150 milligauss. And with if portions of the trail are underneath the line, those levels will be below the 150 milligauss, which is a state-regulated limit, considerably lower, probably in the order of less than half. So there are EMF levels there, obviously, but they're at a level that we don't believe presents any health risk to anybody, which is representative of all the trails that we currently do have in our system.
Any questions? Did you have a presentation that?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I figured we can address this while it's
Why don't
fresh.
we go ahead and we'll do that, and then we'll follow up if that's all right. We'll hold our questions.
I'll need just a minute to set up here. But
Okay.
Thank you. Remember the adapter this time. Just in case. Excuse me. Let me grab my notes here real quick. Again, good morning. Thank you for having us here this morning. And I'm going to jump right into our presentation here. Some of the items here may have been covered by Bill Skinner, our planner, but hopefully I can go into a little bit more detail and then address any questions you have at the end. Before I get started, I wanted to let you know that we do have various experts in the crowd tonight, that if I'm unable to answer one of your questions, we have the appropriate staff here to do so. I'm just going to jump into some for the project overview here. What we're looking at is the construction of a double circuit 345 kV transmission line that's going to connect our Pawnee substation near Brush, Colorado, all the way down to Daniels Park substation just north of Castle Pines. The segments that go through Parker and Douglas County of the transmission line, 5.4 miles in Parker and 9.4 in Douglas County, have already received approval to do the construction in the existing corridor. The components of the project that are before you today consist of the new Harvest Mile substation that's located just east of an existing facility we have out there we call Smoky Hill Substation, and then the construction of that 1.8 miles of new transmission line that are going to be constructed on single steel poles, and that will be from essentially the new Harvest Mile substation down to Daniels Park in Castle Pines. Here's a map that shows kind of the overall project in the metro area that we're dealing with here. My laser's not working on the screen there, but up in the upper right-hand corner is Harvest Mile Substation. The dashed purple line is the existing corridor that we have that runs all the way down south to Daniels Park Substation. We're dealing with 4 different jurisdictions on this project. Like I mentioned, we've been through Douglas County and Parker already. We're before you here today, and then we also have an application with the City of Aurora that has yet to be filed. And here's a map that kind of shows the areas that you are approving or recommending approval for, or denying, or having conditions tied to. Oh, thank you. Excellent. Like Bill pointed out, up here is the Harvest Mile substation outlined in yellow. The blue line represents the existing corridor coming through Aurora. This is the Douglas County border here. And then we have those 2 slivers right here and right here that are in Arapahoe County that make up that 1.8 miles. Now I'll go into a little bit about the purpose and need of the project. We've been looking at this project for over 10 years now, and it's part of our Senate Bill 100 portfolio of projects, and is a very critical component to our long-range system improvement plan. It's going to improve the overall system reliability, and will create what we call a 345 kV backbone all the way from Pawnee down to Comanche, which is in Pueblo. And it will allow for the interconnection of new generation resources out on the Eastern Plains, and will help relieve the existing system that we have right now due to the extensive growth. It's reaching its capacity. And here's that 345 kV backbone map. Maybe a little hard to make out here, but the solid purple line This is Pawnee up in Brush, Colorado. This is Comanche down in Pueblo. So we have existing 345 facilities on each end. This is the middle section where we don't have 345. So we're hoping to, tie that gap and complete that backbone. This is just a quick graph, that shows some of the wind resources that we are anticipating injecting into the system. We're looking at just under 7,000 megawatts, all coming from up near Pawnee and then out on the central eastern plains of Colorado. Our load and resource balance, looking ahead to the year 2023, we're looking at a shortfall of approximately 530 megawatts. So getting these kind of systems in place will help seal that gap so we can lower that number. A couple slides here quick on natural gas, which is going to be a prolific energy resource in northeastern Colorado. There's existing fields out there are pretty prolific. There's also existing pipelines in place, which will make it a real attractive location to build natural gas energy resources. And we see it being economically favorable. A key to managing our intermittency on the wind and solar. When the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, we can back it up with the natural gas. And also, natural gas has the lower pollutants and greenhouse gases. Another big significant project that this is tied to is what we're calling the Rush Creek Wind Farm. We received approval to construct, own, and operate this farm, which is going to be 600 megawatts producing energy. It includes 83 miles of transmission line, and a portion of that is in Arapahoe County and ties into what we call our missile site substation. It's a big injection point for new generation on the Eastern Plains. It's going to allow us to build and operate our lowest cost wind energy on our system. And the project components of Rush Creek were approved by the Board of County Commissioners back in December. And this is kind of a graph or a map that shows how the two projects tie together. Down south here, we have the Rush Creek, two separate wind farms that we're looking at. The pink line or purple line here is the transmission line that's going to connect into the missile site substation in Arapahoe County. And then the blue line represents the Pawnee to Daniels Park transmission line. So once the energy gets to missile site, we need a way to bring it down into the metro area and then ultimately all the way down to Pueblo. And the Pawnee Daniels Park transmission line will help allow us to do that. Real quick, a couple of slides here on some of the timing. Anytime we do a project like this, we are regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. We have to go before them to get what they call a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. We did that back in April of 2015. At that time, they deemed that the project could not start construction until May 2020. After we received that ruling from the PUC, Congress went ahead and passed the production tax credit, which would essentially allow projects that are completely built by 2020 to take full advantage of all those tax credits. So we then filed with the PUC to accelerate our schedule so we could take advantage of that, and we received approval from them in October last year to do so. So the result is kind of what we're looking at here with the schedule of the Harvest Mile substation and the tie line between it and the Smoky Hill substation. We're looking at starting here this spring and having it in service by October of next year. And then the transmission line segment from the new substation down to Daniels Park would start in early 2019 and wrap up before the end of the year in October of 19. Allowing us to advance this in-service date helps us, like I mentioned, take advantage of those tax credits, which will lock in cost savings for our customers and will help deliver that clean, efficient wind energy from the Eastern Plains into our grid. The project location we're dealing with here is a transmission line corridor that was purchased in the early 60s. We bought enough land to accommodate two lines, knowing that at some point in the future we would need multiple lines in that corridor. One line was constructed in 1968 on one side of that corridor, leaving the other open for future use. And as we mentioned before, 1.8 miles of this is in unincorporated Arapahoe County. Again, this is just a quick blow-up of the areas that we're looking at. This is the substation. Here's E470. Quincy Avenue is right here. And then as the transmission line corridor leaves the substation, this is all city of Aurora. We have one little pocket here of Arapahoe County that the transmission line does not cross. And then once you get to Smoky Hill Road down here on the south, that's where you jump into the two pockets here and here that are within unincorporated Arapahoe County. Everything is surrounded by the city of Aurora. Like I mentioned, we do have an application that has yet to be submitted to Aurora. I know there's been a lot of comments and concerns raised by residents of Aurora, and I want to reassure that we will be working with the City of Aurora to address those concerns. As far as residents in Arapahoe County, like I mentioned up here, there's only, I think, 7 residents in Arapahoe County that back up to the corridor. Otherwise, we're dealing with all the residents are in the City of Aurora. Here is a substation aerial, if you will, of what we're proposing. Quincy Avenue is running along the top here. Gun Club Road is right here. Here is our existing Smoky Hill substation. And what we're doing here is showing the ultimate build out for the substation. Initially, we're only going to be constructing this lower third, if you will, but we want to make sure that we permit the ultimate build out so that we don't have to come back at a later date and get additional approvals. This way we can get everything at one time. The yellow lines here represent the lines that would ultimately tie over to the Smoky Hill substation, and then come over and go down south to the Daniels Park substation right here. And one more graphic here that shows the grading that we're proposing. With the land out there, it had some pretty significant topography. So we were able to essentially cut the substation into the side of some of these hills to lower the profile of the equipment, to provide additional screening, and then we are constructing significantly sized 14-foot berms on the east side and the south side to help with the screening of the substation. This was discussed early on with planning, even at the pre-application meeting, that this type of screening would be most appropriate for this area because the substation site is essentially located on the, I guess, the eastern fringe of a very large agricultural parcel right now. That's being farmed for winter wheat. So we figured the screening of the berms would be the best way to kind of blend that into the surrounding environment. Here we have a photo simulation of what the substation will look like with the berms. The vantage point here is taken from the Arapahoe County City of Aurora border, right at the northern edge of Tollgate Crossing. So that's kind of the view that you're looking at. And then this is what the substation would look like with the berms on the south side, and we have some on the east side that you can't quite see from this vantage point. But as you can see, it screens considerably a lot of the lower equipment, or the not quite as high equipment. It's pretty difficult to screen any of this taller equipment, but all the lower equipment is sufficiently screened. And the vantage point from Tollgate Crossing, you're actually kind of looking uphill, so it provides a little bit of additional screening that way, just with the natural topography. Here's some photos of what would be a good representation of what's going to be in the corridor. What's out there right now is these lattice structures on one side of the corridor, and then we'll be coming through and adding this single monopole next to it. We'll be putting the new poles adjacent to the existing ones to prevent like a staggering look, and that will help as much as possible as having those blend in with the existing structures. The existing ones out there are in the range of 100 to 150, depending on the 150 feet, depending on the topography. So the existing poles are pretty much going to be comparable to what's out there right now. Here's a photo simulation of the transmission line corridor. As you can see, even in this photo, there's a trail existing in the corridor that we worked with City of Aurora on. This is the existing line on the left-hand side, and as you can see, we left this right-hand side open for the additional line. We'll be putting those adjacent to the existing structures with that single steel monopole. A lot of discussion. I'm sorry. Yes. Sure. Excuse me. A lot of discussion at the Planning Commission revolved around some of the alternative routes that we had looked at. It wasn't only a requirement of the application that we have to file with Arapahoe County, but a lot of the public comments we received during our outreach wanted us to go out and look at alternative routes. So we did, and we found that best practice is that we parallel existing facilities whenever possible, and it is also part of Arapahoe County's comprehensive policy to do so. So we believe we're meeting that portion of the comprehensive plan. So what we did is we went out and compiled a lot of data, did our opportunities and constraints analysis. Where can we put this? Where can't we? We did some preliminary routes and segments, and then we went out into the field and field checked those to make sure that we weren't missing anything. At that point, then we finalized end-to-end routes, and then went back out and did some additional public outreach on those as well. Excuse me. And it lines up what we are looking for today, approval-wise, with the existing corridor lines up with, like what I mentioned earlier, was already approved in Douglas County and Parker. Here's a map that shows the alternative routes we looked at. The blue line right here, excuse me, is the existing corridor. We also have a green route here that was one of the alternatives we looked at, and then the orange or red route on the perimeter here was a third route we looked at. A lot of the yellow lines you see on there were routes that we had reviewed but eliminated due to certain constraints. In talking about our public outreach, we believe we've done an extensive amount of effort on this. We started in early July 2013, and we had numerous meetings with HOAs, planning staff, NGOs, and various other stakeholders. Before we did our CPCN with the PUC that I mentioned earlier, we did a series of 4 open house meetings, and we invited over 6,000 people to attend that. And then during the middle portions of our CPCN process with the PUC, the administrative law judge that was assigned to the case held an open house meeting in the town of Parker, and that was well advertised and well attended too. And then after our CPCN, we did an additional 3 open house meetings where we invited over 8,300 folks to attend. During the whole process, we've done public comment tracking, including our written forms, emails. We have a hotline set up and a project website as well where we have all the information that was at the open house meetings and is continually updated to this date.
Madam Chair?
Is there a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm just curious. Could you give us a little bit more clarification detail regarding when you say you sent out invitations? How were those delivered?
For the open house meetings, we posted them on the project website. We also did a mailing to all the residents within a quarter mile of the existing corridor for the first open house, and then we also went a quarter mile outside of the alternative routes when we did our second round of open house meetings.
Through mailing?
Through mailing, correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Like I mentioned, we have been tracking our comments in a database, including all of the face-to-face meetings, written comments, hotline calls. This is slightly outdated. We're actually just over 1,000 now total communications that we've had. And based on the current information, all of the respondents showed a strong preference for the existing corridor at 84%, 2% for alternative B, which was the green route, and 12%, which was the red route. Another topic that has been was discussed at the Planning Commission was the idea of putting the transmission line underground. This is an option that we only consider typically when the agency or the jurisdiction requesting put it underground pays for the difference of the underground versus the overhead. Or we don't have the physical space to put it overhead. And we do that a lot down in downtown Denver, where we just don't have the physical space on ground to construct overhead, so we have to put it underground. Time and materials process, this use of transition substation and specialized labor adds significant cost to these. And with this voltage, it's just not prevalent in the United States. There's not many lines that are 345 kV underground in this type of setting. And then there was also some confusion maybe about the cost of putting underground transmission. I think there was a fact sheet that was circulating that was dated or probably for another project. But we have a current fact sheet on our website that indicates that the estimated cost is about $40 million a mile to put the transmission line underground, whereas if you put it overhead, it's $1.5 million. So we're on the order of 25 to 30 times the cost there. And I'll kind of get a couple other slides here. This is the transition substations that we're talking about. Anytime the line goes underground or comes back up, you have to have one of these on each end. So they are not, it's not completely underground. And we also have these vaults that have to be installed every about 1,000, 1,500 feet. Reliability is a huge issue, too, with putting facilities like this underground. If there was a fault in the line, It takes much longer to isolate where the problem's at, and then to get in and make the repairs, it's a lot longer of a construction process. Where with overhead, we're able to identify the area quicker and make the repairs quicker, so the lights stay on much longer. A couple more slides here, and that wraps up the presentation. I just wanted to touch on some of the approval criteria that we're looking at here with Arapahoe County. Section 4 of the 1041 regulations sets forth more than 20 general approval criteria, and as Bill mentioned earlier, we sufficiently meet all those approval criteria in our application materials. And then a couple comprehensive plan comments here, or policies, I guess, that this project is somewhat tied to. Section 4 is growth management, and the strategy for that is to evaluate public facilities on a case-by-case basis. That's pretty much consistent with all the jurisdictions we work with. Each case is somewhat different. But also the county will allow public facilities to be sited anywhere except in sensitive development or riparian corridor areas, and this project doesn't cover either of those two areas, so we're free of that. And then the last one here, like I mentioned earlier, the policy and the strategy is to develop standards for regional utility facilities, and those facilities must be located near similar uses. And with that, I would ask for your approval of this project, and we'll take questions.
Questions, Commissioner Jackson?
Yeah, we're back to the public comment section, and we received a number of letters and queries and so on from our citizens, and one of them said that it wasn't posted except for in some obscure sign somewhere. And then I noticed that you listed a whole bunch of like public meetings, one of which I caught was at the Pace Center, which is in Parker, which is not necessarily relevant to this particular project. So can you tell me a little more specifically about, you said it was everybody from a quarter mile along that corridor, as I understand it, and where were the meetings held?
Sure. To address your question about maybe the sign postings, those were in regards to the hearings for the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, and that we were simply following the county's regulations for posting and mailing notifications, which require us to mail out notifications to every property that's adjacent to the property, plus 500 feet. So we handled that through a mailing, and then we also handled posting for the hearings with signs at, I think 8 or 10 different locations that were coordinated between myself and the planner, Bill Skinner. So those were, I think, the notifications regarding the hearing. As far as the public open house meetings, we did that to kind of cover the whole corridor from Arapahoe County down to Douglas County. So we held those meetings in different locations. Here in Aurora particularly, we held one at the High Point Church, which is just located across the street from Southlands Mall. Oh, great. And then the other one was in Heritage Eagle Bend, kind of on the south end of the county there. And then we did one at the Wildlife Experience for the Parker folks, and also at the Pace Center. We did some hearings there, or open houses there. And then we also did the Parker Recreation Center. As far as mailing for those notifications, that was obviously something that's not required of us to do. We did that of our own goodwill to be good neighbors. Like you mentioned, we notified everybody a quarter mile on each side of the transmission line corridor and the alternatives. And that was handled through individual mailings. We also contacted a lot of the HOAs along the corridor independently and worked with them to have them disseminate the information to their residents, whether it was an email blast or through a newsletter. So it was hard to, we didn't want to just, it's hard to come up with that range where to notify. So there were some homes outside of that quarter mile range within an HOA. So we left it up to the HOA to kind of disseminate that information to the remaining residents.
Commissioner Baker.
Good morning.
Morning.
One of the photographs that you showed that was pretty significant showed an existing trail underneath the current power lines, correct? And one of the other photos that I think that we saw from somebody else that submitted shows that there's gas lines, buried gas lines going through there?
Correct. Yeah, it is a kind of a full use, I guess, utility corridor. We do have a gas pipeline in that as well.
Okay. And that belongs to you as well?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's also, I'm glad you brought that up as a kind of limiting factor with undergrounding, with that utility, or the underground gas line being there. It would take considerable work to relocate that and have enough room to put the underground transmission in as well.
Are there any additional gas pipelines proposed underneath the new or in that corridor at all?
No, not that we're aware of at this time. It was actually an older line that we had acquired from an older utility, and then we did the proper work to get it up to snuff, up to code. So it's, we believe, a safe and functional line. And no plans, as far as I'm aware of, for adding additional gas facilities in the corridor.
And the proposal to bury these lines underground, the cost that you gave, would that be for burying all the lines or just this new second set of lines?
Just the new second set, correct. And we did do a full study to determine the cost. We actually looked at a representative section, 1 mile section in the town of Parker that's very similar to some of the areas here in Aurora. And we've posted that report on our website as well that details how we kind of came up with those figures.
My next question, sorry, I have a series of questions. I know you're, it just slipped my mind. So you showed the percentages of people that approved Route A, Route B, and Route C. And I think that cost kind of goes along with Route A is what you're proposing today, which is in the existing corridor, correct? And Route B would be additional cost to, because it creates a new corridor over, I assume, some people's homes or that don't have a power line in their area right now. And even C further out may not be as many people, residents or anything like that, but you did have the percentages of people that, and it looked like Route A was the number one preferred route. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And do you, were those polls, were people given an opportunity to answer or give their preference at the community meetings that you held?
Correct, yeah, we offered comment forms for people to sign that night, or they could take them home and then mail them in. They could also email those comments directly to myself. We did have a hotline as well set up that we could make those comments and add those to the tracker. So one more note to kind of address on the open houses that we did. We also did a couple selective HOA meetings, two of which were with the Tollgate Crossing HOA. Most recently was back in October of 2016 was the last time we met with those folks. And you did bring up a good point. The alternative routes, we don't have corridor along those routes, so that's something that we have to acquire from the landowners. We typically don't like to condemn, but we do have that ability. And with a couple of locations on that Route C, we would end up having to take a couple homes. It's a little bit more, the parcels are a little bit larger, but there are homes out near those areas. So like you mentioned, those folks are not aware or living next to an existing corridor. So those figures that we were looking at, the number of newly impacted residents along those routes would be 1,160 folks along Route B and just under 900 along Route C that don't currently live next to a transmission line corridor and that we'd have to acquire easement from.
Follow up on the percentages. That was for all of this project, people in Parker, people in Douglas County, people in Aurora, people in unincorporated Arapahoe County so those are percentages for everyone.
Correct. Throughout the whole corridor.
I don't know if I don't want you to do it, but if you could say what percentage of people were in how those responses came from people in unincorporated Arapahoe County, Could you venture a guess? Or?
Unfortunately, I don't have those figures. It's something that I think we could pull together fairly quick. Maybe not this afternoon or at this setting, but if I could venture a guess, unfortunately, I can't. There were so many comments that came in, close to 1,000.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Conti.
I'm just curious, the existing homes that we see in this photograph, were they there prior to the construction of your transmission lines?
Yes, like I mentioned, the existing line was constructed in 1968, and I think for the entire length in the city of Aurora, there was no development around that corridor. Everything kind of built up around it.
Okay, so the homes came in after your lines were already there?
Correct.
Okay, and to your knowledge, any difference or reduction in property value based on those homes that are closer to the power lines over ones that are further interior?
Not to our knowledge. We hired a third-party independent appraiser to do studies for us. And this subdivision that we're looking at right here is actually Sorrel Ranch in the photo simulation. And we did, it was very surprising, a lot of the results we received from that HOA as far as sales go, all being public information. We did a study, I think, last year, and we just did one most recently with 6 sales in the area. 3 were adjacent to the transmission line corridor. 3 were removed, kind of on the interior of the HOA. And of the 3 that were adjacent to the corridor, they were on the market the least amount of time, anywhere from 3 days to 13 days, where the others were up on the market for over a month. And the cost or the sale price is actually comparable or higher than the ones that are interior.
Could we, is there a way that we could possibly see a copy of that?
I have one copy right here. I
Yeah.
can circulate it.
That would be great. Thank you.
See if he... Okay.
And we do have copies of the additional copies here of what I just handed you. I didn't realize we had extras.
Okay. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes. I'm intrigued by this invisible electromagnetic force, and I appreciate you telling us that the measurement is below what is required by the state. And as I look at that photo and I think about 2 lines being there, I'm wondering if there is any interaction between the lines of force with 2 there. I just don't understand the size of it well enough to understand what the impact might be if you have two forces, if you will, and then meeting somewhere.
Sure, absolutely. And I got a good graph here. I think that'll kind of illustrate.
Oh, great. And then maybe that has something to do with how far you put them apart?
Correct, right.
Okay.
And, that all stems back to when we initially purchased the property. We got enough right-of-way to accommodate 2 lines of this voltage. And before I go any further, when we did our CPCN testimony with the PUC, their ruling is whether or not the project's needed, but they also look at what's acceptable for EMF and noise levels, and they deemed that what we had modeled would meet those levels sufficiently. In this graphic here, you can kind of see this green line with the X's is kind of the existing conditions that are out right now. You can see this is kind of where it peaks. This is where the existing line is at. And then the black line that kind of illustrates normal loading for 2 transmission lines. Here's the first line. There's a dip in between, and then here's the second line. And as you can see, as soon as you move away from the center line, it drops off considerably. We're down to levels here that are 15, 20 maybe milligauss at the most. And the red line you see here is kind of absolute worst case scenario. If we ever get levels like this, we have other concerns. And you can see that, and same with the green line here, this is simulating 2 lines in the corridor at our maximum loading. And even at this point, we are just barely over the 150 milligauss, and we rarely see these kind of conditions. So the black line here with the dots is kind of the normal operating conditions. And here you're looking at levels maybe in the 75 milligauss range.
Mr. Jackson.
Yep, so is the horizontal access feet away from the pole, or?
Correct, yeah. This is our corridor is 210 feet wide.
Okay.
And you can see the first line here is, offset from, I'm sorry, this line right here is the edge of the corridor. So the lines are kind of in the middle here and spaced so that we have the proper clearances. But as part of our modeling for the EMF levels, the way the line's designed, with two lines next to each other, you actually get some EMF cancellation, and the EMF levels go down.
So they cancel. I knew something was going to happen when they met, so they cancel. So which line represents the state standard?
Is 150 milligauss, which would be at this level right here.
So sort of the top of the green one.
Correct, and that is only under maximum operating conditions.
Like summer air conditioning, or?
I'm going to have to bring up one of our transmission engineers that could better answer that.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Danny Pearson, Transmission Engineering Public Service Company, 1800 Larimer, Denver, 80202. As Derek said, the green dotted line here is the existing condition, or the existing corridor. The black line, what you see here, is what the normal loading. I'm going to say 75% or more of the time it'll be at this level or less, and another 25% of the time it's going to be slightly more. The green line is the maximum loading that we'd ever expect to see on the two lines that we have in the corridor. Like you said, the red line is an absolute emergency situation where the whole system's about ready to collapse. The 150 milligauss we refer to is at this dotted line and this dotted line. The values would not exceed 150 milligauss. We are not restricted as what the maximum field we can have on our corridor, but it is at the edge of the corridor is where the restrictions of 150 milligauss is in effect. Yes, ma'am.
So, and if I go too deep and too weedy, let me know. But so a person walking under those lines conceivably could be exposed to those very high levels, which are allowable by the state.
The answer to that question is yes, it could be a possibility, but most of the time the maximum loading or the maximum fields they're going to see is around, I'm going to say, less than 100 milligauss.
And that's considered harmless, pretty much.
I'm not going to go into that, but there's thousands of studies that show it's harmless. There's thousands of studies show there might be a potential problem.
So don't pitch your tent underneath there.
I would personally would not have a problem pitching my tent even under the worst case scenario out there. That's my personal opinion.
Okay. All right. That's great. Okay. I think I had another question, but it has slipped my mind. So
just
thank you.
One more clarification. It's the limit for 150 milligauss would be at this dotted line and this dotted line. In our worst case scenario, we're around, I'm going to say 60 milligauss at the edge of our corridor, and that would be the total emergency type of situation. And most of the time we're around the 10 milligauss or less area, or as Derek said, 15 milligauss or less at the edge of our corridor. And that would be on as you're coming south along the corridor, it'd be on the west side, and as we turn and go east or west, it'd be on the southerly or northerly side, depending upon which side. But it would be the mountain side of the corridor would be the side that you would see the larger values.
Interesting. Okay.
And the existing side, essentially the numbers are within a few milligauss of being the same numbers after the cancellation we have with the new line and the existing line.
Very good. Our trail, I think, kind of winds in and out and around it, but nobody's under it for a real long time.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a couple questions, and we got some information, and my comments or my questions are really on the substation, and I think a number of questions were from the Metro District, Tollgate Crossing Metro District number 2. And so they were some to do with a variety of issues, but pedestrian crossings, landscaping, but most of it was landscaping is not maintained currently well by Excel. Let's see, with weeds and things like that. And some of the other things were really water, any toxic water. So I asked if you could address that, if that's an issue, endangered, threatened, or sensitive wildlife. And the last question that I had really on the substation were the sort of the screening, because we've seen some pictures of the Thornton substation. And so my question is, what do you do to, other than landscaping, and what rises to the level of doing something like this that you all did in Thornton? So those are kind of my questions, and I think, and mostly the Metropolitan Board, if you've addressed those questions with them.
Well, I'll start off with maybe a little bit of the right-of-way maintenance that we do in the transmission line corridor. We do have a vegetation management crew that goes in and maintains that about twice a year is what I've been told. That's mainly to knock down the grasses, keep the grasses at a reasonable level. As part of one of the conditions of the approval today is that we come up with a noxious weed plan. So we would definitely follow through with that and make sure that it's administrated throughout the life of the corridor. We have over 1,200 properties in the state, so our vegetation management crew is very busy. That's kind of one of the main reasons why we only do it once or twice a year. It depends on the weather, too. If we get a rainy season, we'll come out more and get the grasses to a reasonable level. But as far as kind of the endangered species that you had mentioned, that kind of stems from the prairie dogs that are out there right now. There's what they call a burrowing owl is a sensitive species, and it uses those burrows, the prairie dogs, for their activities. So we're not aware of any threatened or endangered species, the burrowing owl out there, but we go through with surveys to make sure that that's the case. But from our early research and when we did our alternative routes, we looked at that and didn't find any populations in the corridor. And the vegetation, or I'm sorry, the maintenance in the corridor kind of stems or is connected to the prairie dogs a little bit. Typically, in our experience at least, when the grass is a little bit higher, it keeps the prairie dogs' activity down to a minimum. Then when we go in there and we lower the grasses, they tend to are more active. So it's kind of a hit or miss as far as some folks want lower grasses, some want higher. So it's just trying to find that balance to keep the prairie dogs also at bay. Our company policy is to not touch the prairie dogs. It's a sensitive issue. There's a lot of proponents and a lot of opponents against that topic. So we do allow folks that are interested in taking care of the problem on their own access to our easement. We grant a license agreement. They can go in and do the work. But from a company standpoint, we stay neutral in that position and try to handle it through our vegetation management.
Okay. And what about the screening in the Thornton substation?
Yeah, the Thornton substation is a very, very unique situation or site. Like I mentioned, these projects are typically considered on a case-by-case basis. Essentially what we're doing in Thornton is putting a substation right in the middle of like a toll gate crossing, where the wall kind of better suits the surrounding environment there. Whereas here we're in an agricultural field and we're trying to use the berms to achieve the same thing as a wall that help blend in with the surrounding environment a little bit better. That was something, at least with the city of Thornton, they got engaged early with us with the wall. And like I said, we engaged planning staff early on this as well, and we agreed that the best way to achieve screening would be through the berming as opposed to a wall. So I hope that addresses your issue on the subject.
How tall is the berm?
Pardon me?
How tall is the berm?
14 feet.
14 feet. Okay. Seems like I'm kind of like you, Commissioner Jackson. Seems like I had another question, but I'll try to think of it. And Commissioner Baker.
Thank you. Yeah, this may be an agricultural like environment right now, but there are a lot of things happening in that area with the fairgrounds. I believe these transmission lines, the existing ones, come right across the fairgrounds right now. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, they're coming from the east. They come from
the east. Correct, a portion of it. And then you heard earlier about the widening of Quincy and the setbacks that we talked about in the earlier planning case. There's a fire and police training academy for the city of Aurora out there. And Quincy is a thoroughfare, a corridor, so to speak, for a lot of people further east. And I just think that in about 10 years, that area is going to look completely different than agricultural right now. So I think that is what has caused my particular interest in using maybe the Thornton substation as a model, or increased berm, or increased buffering, increased walls, increased somehow to preserve as much as possible the view from Tollgate Crossing. And of course, our planners they do a great job with the rules we provided them to go by for that area and the comprehensive plan. But I think that maybe this might be a case where we look to the future a little bit more. Crystal balls are tough. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But I do believe that just because of the amount of traffic at the intersection of Gun Club and Quincy, and the improvements to that intersection that we've heard from a lot of our constituents, that's very much needed out there, is that this is going to be in the term of a real estate agent, location, location, location. This is going to be a hot location. And a lot of additional construction and commercial, and I don't know about residential. We don't know what's going to happen with the land board buildings, or the land board properties to the north. But I can, so that's I just wanted to kind of explain to you, because I wasn't completely satisfied with the answer you gave Commissioner Sharp on the Thornton as far as it being unique. This is unique too.
Sure.
And so I guess what I'm thinking is along the same lines of working with the open spaces department on the trail, which I didn't hear you say you're opposed to a trail or continuing the trail across. And I guess that's a continuing negotiation. But I would like to think that maybe the aesthetics of the substation might be something that could still be under a little bit more negotiation as well.
Yeah, I believe one of the conditions that was passed through by the Planning Commission was to provide landscaping at the substation, either on the berms or around it, and that's something that we're obviously willing to consider. I think part of that would stem from the trail activity that Open Space has asked us to work with them on, and we're definitely open to working with them on that, as well as plenty of landscaping there along the trail, which is actually would be in between the substation and the residence here, so kind of in this area is where we're looking for the trail. Landscaping is a kind of a tough area for us. Obviously, this area, water isn't an issue, obviously, but just the clearance issues with our facilities. We have to maintain certain clearances, and even if a tree is not at a height that will pose any problems with our clearances, if it has the potential to grow up into the line, our vegetation management folks just cut it down. With as much property as that we deal with, they can only get to certain areas so often, so they don't want to come back on a continual basis, so they'll just eliminate those species right away. As far as addressing the wall issue, like I mentioned, it's a totally different situation, we believe, and I think that the screening of the berm that we're incorporating, like I mentioned, is 14 feet high. whereas the wall would probably be less tall in this situation. And if you look at the photo simulation that we worked on for the substation, you can see all of the lower equipment is screened. Only thing that's showing here is some of the higher equipment that's in the yard, and we can't build a wall that high to screen that. So we've done our best to get the berm to screen as much of the lower elevation equipment as we can, and we believe it suits the site and the surrounding area, and achieves what essentially a wall would, or if not more than what an 8-foot wall would achieve.
I just had, where was this simulation taken from? What view?
Here's kind of along the edge here. This is the very northern edge of Tollgate Crossing. So we were just on the on our property just outside these backyards when we took the photo, kind of looking north. This is Harvest Road and an existing City of Aurora pump house right here.
And what's the distance between the closest home and that berm?
What we're showing here is 614 feet.
Okay.
And I'd like to mention that the berm that we're proposing at the substation here equals the height of the proposed wall at Thornton. That application is still pending. There hasn't been any approval on that, so nothing as far as the wall or aesthetics is written in stone yet. That's still pending the the city council approval.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing, and I have what we've got is we've got a light here that it allows 3 minutes per person, and the yellow light will come on with 30 seconds left, and the red light will be when I would ask you to conclude your comments. And I do have 2 people that are going to present together, and they are presenting for a number of people, so I'm going to allow them 15 minutes because they are representing, and those people are not going to come up separately. So we're going to save a little time and let them do the presentation for a group of people. Now, I also have people who, everybody, well, I'll tell you who's for and against, and then who is speaking or not speaking. And, if you signed up, no, you didn't want to speak, if you changed your mind, I'll ask you to, either way, you're welcome to change your mind. So we'll start with Meredith. Yes, sorry. Come on down. And if you would just state your name and address for the record, please. And you are speaking against.
And I have a longer version of my letter that I made last night, but I shortened it to 3 minutes for each of you as well. And then I also have a whole bunch of these, and this was just in the last week. So my name is Meredith Latcha. Good morning. I am coming to you as a Denver native.
Sorry, your address.
Oh, sorry. I live at 4930 South Flat Rock Way in Tollgate Crossing. I am here as a Denver native. I also am a science teacher and a concerned citizen. I have been teaching biology, physics, and environmental sciences ranging from college prep levels to the AP advanced levels for the past 23 years. The Pawnee Daniels Excel project impacts 5 of the Arapahoe County districts. It is an extensive transmission and power line project that includes building an enormous 345 kilovolt substation carrying the voltage along an already existing corridor, and by just adding new towers for these power lines. However, the new substation, the Harvest Mile, will be less than 1 mile east of the already existing 230 kilovolt station. This is now 2 extremely large and ugly utility substations along the northern border of a lovely and quiet growing community. Tollgate Crossing. By putting more power lines and substations into this area, we are creating and increasing the EMF because we do get superposition of the electromagnetic waves as well as canceling out. This area is growing and adding a new middle school and homes as we speak today. Excel has created a smoke screen with our comment forms, which only allow for feedback on which route the power lines will take, not on where the substation will be located. And it is taking the focus off of this eyesore. After talking to Derek, who is the Excel agent, I was told that the argument for having a second larger substation less than 1 mile to the current one is because it is closer to the current substation. And that does not sound fair. When companies begin to state that they might as well put their eyesore, a building, a utility station, or a dump in areas where one is already existing, it becomes what the AP environmental curriculum would define as a classic case of environmental racism. As you are our representatives, are you really okay that Excel can come in and slide in and not be held accountable? By putting more power lines through Tollgate community and placing the monstrosity of that substation in the same area, it is not beneficial for property values, it is not appropriate for the land, and it is not good press. This is a black eye on a lovely area in Arapahoe County. This is an area that was picked for the Arapahoe County Fairgrounds, the racetrack, and Aurora Reservoir. This area gets many visitors that would see this substation, and what you decide to do will be extremely important. You, the Arapahoe Board of Commissioners, will have the power to make a difference. You were voted in by the residents to keep our communities that we choose to live in, to have these beautiful residences and properties protected. Here is a chance for all of you to help us out. If they keep Route 8 and the new substation at the location along the Tollgate Crossing community, there needs to be a compromise. Help Tollgate Crossing, which is housing 2 large substations that power and benefit the entire Arapahoe County, including homes and businesses that are now nowhere close to the substation chosen. Force Excel to make the money which it's saving by using Route A and put that money towards creating an aesthetically appealing substation, one with more vegetation. They've done it before. They have the Thornwood we've talked about, but we need to make sure that we insist Excel buries the lines between the 2 substations and that the power, that they give money to all the residents to offset the view that they would be seeing. Force Excel to beautify it and with the large and erected walls as well as the berm he was talking about and making sure that the trees and shrubs and the entire area are upkept.
If you could, I'm sorry.
I know, and I was going to tell you, my mom signed up right after me, and she told me I could take some of her minutes if that's what, I didn't know you could do that, and I don't know if we could. I have like 1 paragraph. I have 1 paragraph left.
Okay.
I have 1 paragraph left, and I do apologize. So Force Excel to make the berm like the one that is currently, not like the one that is currently off of the Smoky Hill one on Gun Club. Have them create a power line with corridors that are pleasant to walk through. Make Excel, whose motto is responsible by nature, to do what it should be doing anyway, helping to keep the land valuable. Jeffrey Baker, you are our representative. You are our voice, and this is your district that you can help keep beautiful and people around you proud in the area. Kathleen Conti, Nancy Sharp, Bill Holden, and Nancy Jackson, you represent the rest, and we are taking the brunt of the eyesore. We need you to vote no on this substation unless Excel puts money into creating a more aesthetically appealing area for the power lines and substation. Make a stand, show your support, and make Excel take these actions no compromise. We have already compromised too much. Make it to be a project you are proud of helping create, and that will be looked upon as a great example of sustainability, not just in energy, but in land value and rejuvenating a degraded area. More importantly, be stewards to the earth, to the land, so that Arapahoe County can continue to not only be the 3rd largest county, but one that is also the best county to live in. Thank you.
Okay, I have Lois Jensen.
Yeah, I'm the daughter of...
Oh.
I'm her mother, rather. I'm one of the 3 that just bought the home.
And I'm...
If I had known that, I would never have bought it.
Okay. Thank you.
It's going to be an Excel ghetto.
Okay. I have Chris Romano, and you decide, no, Chris, not to speak? Well, you have to come down. But we don't normally... we can ask that of staff at a later, but we don't normally sort of interact. Pardon me? Yeah, come on down and ask your question, then we can bring the applicant back up. Just your name and address for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Chris Romano. I live at 4874 South Elk Street in Aurora, and that's also in the Tollgate community. Really just one question. Were there other sites available for this substation that were either proposed or investigated or researched prior to deciding that this was the best location for the Harvest Mile substation.
Great, we will ask that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Brian Matisse?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm Brian Matisse of 5378 South Harvest Way. I'm also Director and Secretary Treasurer of the Tollgate Crossing Metropolitan District Number 2, and also I am also the President of the Tollgate Crossing Homeowners Association. Tollgate Crossing Metropolitan District Number 2 is a Title 32 special district in Arapahoe County. Tollgate Crossing is a subdivision of over 1,300 homes with 4,000 residents. The Board of Tollgate Crossing Metropolitan District Number 2 authorized me to represent the district, and they unanimously voted at their last meeting to oppose XL's application as presently submitted. The Homeowners Association also voted against approving the application as well. The Tollgate Crossing is the Metro District that actually installed those trails that you saw within Tollgate Crossing. We were the ones that paid for it with our bond money. We are the ones that are responsible for maintaining adjacent landscaping, parks, and recreational trails. The district issued more than $16 million of bonds for improvements such as these for our subdivision, and we're paying 52 mills of property taxes to maintain that. For the last 4 years, Tollgate Crossing Metro District Number 2 and the HOA have been trying to get XL to work with us and get commitments for mitigation, but they've refused to work with the district to make a single commitment to this date. For example, last fall, the Metro District had a public meeting with XL, offered to work with them to explore financing infrastructure that could offset the cost of burying the power lines. Our district is in excellent financial shape and could partner with them to finance that burying the power lines for less than 1 mile in Tollgate Crossing. XL has refused to deal with this, has refused to even come back to us to talk to us about that. Second, the existing right-of-way runs through the middle of our community. Prairie dogs use this right-of-way to take over the community and damage Metro District landscaping, including our parks and our neighboring home landscaping. We've requested multiple times that XL install effective prairie dog fences at the boundaries of their right-of-way, but they have refused to do so. They've also refused any other mitigation on the grounds that the abandoned holes may contain sensitive, endangered, and threatened species, and that was just 2 years ago. Of course, now they say, on the other hand, that there are no threatened or endangered species in these holes, taking just the opposite contradictory position to what they took to us 2 years ago. Installing these new power lines will spread prairie dogs and noxious plant material, including noxious weeds, throughout our Metro District landscaping. It will also extend the lifespan of this nuisance that is in the middle of our community, while the existing 49-year-old power lines are approaching the end of their useful life. The power lines would be 150 feet above the surrounding terrain and would run through our neighborhood atop Dove Hill. That's at 6,050 feet. The total height of these power lines would extend to 6,200 feet, 500 feet higher than the Buckley Air Force Base runway. We are in the flight path of fighter jets that train regularly, especially at night. If one of those jets hits a power line and crashes in the neighborhood, killing our residents, it will be on your head, Commissioners. Fourth, the substation location should be moved east of Harvest Road. The proposed location is immediately adjacent to Tollgate Crossing residential neighborhoods alongside the Murphy Creek floodplain. East of Harvest Road, which was a place they were considering moving it to, would be outside the residential area in a non-residential area, and it would be away from the Murphy Creek floodplain. In the event of a toxic release from the capacitors, and there was one that occurred about 12 years ago in the adjacent area, in that event, we would not have the risk to neighboring homes, nor would we have the risk to the Murphy Creek floodplain. And finally, XL has no plan for retirement of these transmission lines when they are obsolete. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matisse. Okay, I have Lisa Clark and Len Reynolds, and they're going to do a joint presentation for a number of other people, and then I have a few people who are left who would like to speak after that. Welcome. If you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Lisa Clark. I live at 24355 East Roxbury Circle, 80016. I live in the Talons Reach neighborhood, and my home backs up to the easement that's in unincorporated Arapahoe County. I can see 2 transmission lines currently. I'm speaking today on behalf of about 120 residents who filled out a petition within the last 4 days. I'm kind of late to the game, but was at the Planning Commission meeting. I made you copies of the Thornton substation information. In there's also information about a substation being built in Greeley, and also one that was an award-winning substation built in Minneapolis. And I do realize that the voltage that we're talking about is different. I get that. In those areas, though, Excel was pushed to work with the city and listen to the citizens and came up with solutions that worked for everyone. For example, in Thornton, we're talking about, the clearances and we can't plant trees and we can't do this and we can't do that. Well, okay, so we're going to bury the power lines going into and out of the substation. For Tollgate, because I have a feeling that odds are pretty good that this substation is going to go somewhere near that area, and if it doesn't, yay, that would be wonderful. But I think the compromise would be, let's increase the clearances by burying the power lines for a half mile in and a half mile out. I know there's increased costs, but again, in those examples that I provided to you, Excel has figured out how to distribute the cost across all ratepayers. They've gotten permission from the PUC. We really are just asking for a design with the community in mind, and as Commissioner Baker pointed out, this is an area that is growing so fast. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. My home is 10 years old, and I'm sure that there were power lines there when it was built, and there will be power lines there when I move. I understand that. We would also consider having certain areas of power lines buried, so obviously the ones into and out of the new substation, but also there are areas along the easement that could benefit from the burying of power lines, and we're talking like 1 to 2 miles of trails and open space area currently, where, putting up extra power lines not only increases the EMF, but it does detract from the attractiveness of the area. So we're proposing 2 miles between Smoky Hill Road, the corner of Smoky Hill and Aurora Parkway, down to Coolidge, or South Coolidge Way, and then again, half mile in and out of the substation. Also, something that Excel did not bring up was that there are concessions being given to people in Parker along the easement. They're providing $500 for landscaping, which is like a tree, not much. We would ask for more, especially for residents of Tollgate, and we would also ask for accommodation being given to the HOAs that are impacted as well. As you can see from the photographs that are shown, you've got fence line and you've got power lines, but there's nothing being done along that fence line to try and make anything to do with that easement any more attractive. So in my backyard, we have lots of trees. It steps down to a creek that runs parallel to Aurora Parkway. And there are additional trees down beyond our fence line. And it just softens the industrial look. I would propose that, it's something that Excel look into. We're not asking them to plant cottonwood trees directly underneath power lines. We understand that's a safety issue. But something to be done for the residents along that fence line to soften the look would be more than appreciated. I also want to address the existing Smoky Hill station. As you can see from the pictures that I presented to you and also Lynn presented to you, it is beyond unattractive. It is not well maintained. Obviously, it was there before there were homes there. We understand this was a choice to buy a home there. We get it. But, times change, areas evolve. We would ask that some accommodation and consideration be given to that substation. wall it, try and make it more attractive, improve the landscaping. If you consider how long that substation has been there and look at the landscaping that's around it, it looks like it was just planted maybe within the last 5 years. And it's certainly not anything that I would consider substantial or a good accommodation for or consideration for the neighborhood. Let's see here.
And only got 15 minutes.
Okay, I know.
Two of you all.
I know. I would also request on behalf of the neighbors that we have independent EMF readings taken. Just because it is a public safety issue, it is under debate. So to have Excel presenting that sort of information is sort of like allowing the fox to kind of monitor the hen house. So we would request at their expense that an independent reading be taken.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Lynn Reynolds, 5351 South Eaton Parkway, Aurora. I live in Tollgate Crossing. Yes, thank you. We have been fighting this battle for almost 2 years. We've had petitions with up to 300 people signed to try to take a different route around our homes, around our area. We don't want to burden another area, but the route right through our homes, our school, our parks is offensive. These roads are fairly small. They're not huge roads. And you can see from the pictures there that they don't look like the pictures that you see on some of the slides of towers far in the distance. They're right there. And those that are there now, we have to own them. We have to own them because we bought houses and they were already there. But the substation, I submit that the substation has gotten larger and larger or expanded as time has gone on, because it certainly looks like a true infrastructure ghetto at this point. It is a total eyesore. You have to see it to believe it. Even the pictures that I took Saturday morning, which is when I took these, don't do it justice. It's horrific. You can hardly take your eyes off it. And to think that there's going to be another substation right behind it with already existing homes, people that have been living there for 8-9 years, I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right at all. Excel has not treated us at Tollgate with a lot of respect or consideration. We asked that they bury the power lines. They said no. Too expensive. I also submit that Excel, with all their profits of last year, and I can't speak to what their bills are, but they made over $1 billion. $1,123 million. I submit that they can't afford to make some ameliorations here to this particular project. We would like them to bury the power lines, and we would like them to not put up additional towers in our neighborhoods. And we would also like them to take the substation and put it farther east or put it farther someplace else. Put it on the dump if they want to. The dump is out there. But not put it in our neighborhood with the other substation just catty-corner to it. It's just not right. Please, when you vote, no matter what you thought when you came in the room, think of this. We have not been treated fairly by Excel. And we're just asking that you please don't vote their way right now. There's got to be a different way. They haven't listened to us. They won't listen to us, but they will listen to you. Thank you.
Okay. I think Reynolds is not going to speak. I have Ken and Marie Vincent, who are opposed but do not want to speak. Jennifer Friend and is supporting and does want to speak.
Thank you so much. I am Dr. Jennifer Friend, and I live at 27546 East Elmhurst Place, and that's in Aurora 80016. I am here today representing the neighborhood of Blackstone Country Club in southeast Aurora, Arapahoe County.
When we heard of the proposed Route C for the Pawnee Daniels Park Transmission Project, we took action in the form of petitions sent to our Arapahoe County Commissioner at the time and Aurora City Council, which now has over 241 signatures online and more on the paper petition that is stored at the country club. The residents of Blackstone Country Club are in strong support of the preferred route indicated on Excel's map, which uses the existing transmission corridor, also known as Route A. We strongly oppose the route alternative C indicated in red on the earlier map that he showed, which would strongly impact our neighborhood. We strongly oppose route alternative C because it is at least $75 million more to install per Excel's estimates. It impacts a brand new area which never anticipated having power transmission lines surrounding it, and we believe it will negatively impact our property values and community future. A homeowner on alternative C could never have predicted a transmission corridor going in, and many specifically bought in these communities to avoid living near transmission corridors. We are in strong support of the preferred route because it is the most cost-effective option and it uses the existing infrastructure, therefore benefiting all Excel customers in the state of Colorado. Residents along the existing corridor knowingly purchased their homes with power lines as part of their community and thus agreed to that at the time of their purchase. The existing corridor has been around, as you know, for over 40 years. And at the time it was constructed, there were no residences in the area, as Excel's own photos and data illustrate. Therefore, all homeowners who live across the preferred route knowingly purchase their homes with the knowledge that there were current lines, and of course that expansion is always possible. Additionally, the preferred route has been approved by the City of Parker and Douglas County, which shows that the residents of Parker and Douglas County support the route as well. Getting this corridor finished in a timely manner is important to the power supply of our growing communities. It is irresponsible to force all Excel users in the state of Colorado to pay almost 3 times as much in increased rates to appease the arguments of a vocal minority of citizens and only a small representation of Arapahoe County. As taxpayers, voters, and Excel customers, we strongly urge Arapahoe County to join the City of Parker and Douglas County in approving the preferred route, which uses the existing transmission corridor. The other routes are unacceptable to us as residents and will be acceptable to all other Excel customers, both residential and commercial, due to significant and unnecessary costs. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Brand. Okay, I have Tori Brown, but not wanting to testify, and then David Gruber, who is supporting and would like to speak. Morning.
I'm David Gruber. I live at 7935 South Coolidge Way in Aurora. I'm president of the Creekside Homeowners Association and vice president of the Eagle Bend Metropolitan District Board of Directors. Our neighborhood is on the southern area of the unincorporated path. We are on the west side. We have about 40 houses that face it, as well as our clubhouse. As far as the path, the point I want to make is that we would prefer not to have any electrical lines there at all. However, they were there before we built, and they are there now. And we understand that the easement is in place, and we understand that it's the most economical way to put in power lines. Given that, we've had meetings with Excel and their representatives to discuss our requests, and those include things like putting up additional trees, removing the barbed wire that they have in place right now along their right-of-way, adding split rail fences, and doing things to help us mitigate the negative appearance of the additional power lines. So my bottom line is that given that this is the most economical path, given that the lines are going to go in, we recognize that. Our point is that we want to mitigate the appearance as best we can, and we want to work with the city to make that all happen. So my point, as I conclude, I just want to point out that we have been working with Excel. Excel has been working with us in good faith. We understand that the city of Aurora is now engaged in negotiations with Excel over what those mitigation elements will be, and we understand that the new power lines will go in as designed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's everyone that I had signed up. Is there anyone who would like to speak who has not signed in? Bob?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Robert Golden. I'm the President and CEO of the South Metro Denver Chamber. We are at 2154 East Commons Avenue in streets of South Glen Centennial. Our chamber represents about 700 businesses in Arapahoe County, primarily in Centennial, but parts of Jefferson County and Douglas as well. We're very proud to be in Arapahoe. When people ask us about our chamber, we say we are Arapahoe County, so we're very proud of that. Our primary focuses are really in three areas, none more important than economic development. So I'm here today to talk about the business impact and how our organization believes this is a critical project to go forward. We spend a lot of time with existing businesses to encourage them to stay and grow in our area, but we also spend a lot of time with companies that are coming to Arapahoe County, Centennial, thinking about relocating. And, you know, we're very fortunate because we're growing. We're just in a great area, and we're very grateful for that. And I was thinking on the drive over here today, the number one thing we hear from companies that are looking to relocate is transportation and traffic. What are you going to do about the transportation and traffic problems? And we just finished a session, and you know there will be more to follow. But I think for me, what came to mind was that we all make an assumption that we will have power and utilities. I don't think a lot of people really think too hard about it. We believe that this is an important project for South Denver, for the South Metro Denver area. And we believe that this expansion is critical so that we can continue to grow, particularly welcoming businesses into our area. We're growing and we're prospering, and we want to keep doing that on behalf of all of the members of every elected official and everybody that lives in Arapahoe County. So on behalf of our South Metro Denver Chamber, I do encourage you to support this project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Mason Svansik. I reside at 6046 South Ukraine Street in Aurora, 80015. I'm coming to you guys in support of this proposal. I have been a resident of Arapahoe County for all my life. I'm a Colorado native. 19 years. I've lived in unincorporated Arapahoe County for the past 10 this month. And I've noticed that this area is growing. It is one of the most expanding areas in Colorado right now. The county is growing like crazy, and I think this is a part of what we have to realize, that to be able to, you know, have all these people come here and have the people who want the opportunities that we have available, we have to understand that that comes with providing the energy that is needed for that. The developments that are going on in Arapahoe County, I mean, I heard somebody say that the orange traffic cone is going to be the Colorado State flower soon because of how much we're growing, and I think this is very important. I mean, we, in the last year, 92,000 people we've added in Arapahoe County alone. So I think it's very important that we make sure that energy is a part of this new development. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Wilson Crum. I live at 15532 East Kenyon Avenue in Aurora. And we moved here in early 81, and at the time we moved to our current home, we were on the extreme east edge of the metropolitan area. And since that time, the growth has been huge, as you all are aware. And it's causes us to have more infrastructure. Reliable energy is a part of our quality of life. We often take for granted light with a flip of a switch or a cold beverage, but all are a product of responsible energy. I'm happy to support this project and applaud Excel for planning this growth. The right-of-way they're planning to build this line on was purchased in the 60s. All who bought homes from the 70s forward knew the corridor was there, saw those power lines.
And whether we like it or not, the growth is happening, and we need infrastructure. I thank you again for your time and ask that you support this project. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Ariana Dufour, 7600 East Cayley Avenue. That is in Centennial, Colorado, 80111. I appreciate your time for letting me take a minute to address the Pawnee Daniels Park transmission line. I'm an Arapahoe County resident, but I actually did grow up on the southeastern plains of Colorado, and I grew up somewhere that has a lot of old power lines, and it's somewhere that a storm blows through, the power goes out. And so having been exposed to some of the poorest counties in the state, it really makes me appreciate the incredible opportunity and the potential that we have in Arapahoe County and the entire metro area. And with that opportunity comes needs. And one of the most critical needs is reliable and redundant power transmission. It's just a fact of life. The Pawnee Daniels Park project will provide us with just that. And I mean, we're talking about a corridor that obviously has been there for a very, very long time. So building along it only seems to make the most sense. And I commend Xcel for having the long-term vision to meet its customers' needs in a time of what everyone has said is amazing growth. The need is there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Hi. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Yuri Gorlov. I'm here on behalf of the Aurora Economic Development Council at 12510 East Iliff Avenue, 80014. I'm here in support of the project. Xcel has been extremely communicative with our office throughout this process and letting us know what the steps have been and what their outreach efforts would be. And every step of the way, they've been very open about the process. And in terms of general, just lending our economic development perspective, we believe that this transmission line is extremely important to the continued growth of Aurora in Arapahoe County. And we understand the parameters that have been set forth by the county and by the city that is forthcoming, as you've learned. And we just think that the infrastructure being put in place by Xcel anywhere in the state and in the region is extremely important. So just wanted to lend our thoughts on that and our support behind this project.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. I would like to ask you, sir, to come back up. I think there were a couple of questions that I had that were brought up, and maybe others as well. First, I'm going to start with a different location. Did you look at different locations, not one that was quite so close to the existing substation, but further to the east? And honestly, I can't tell you who'd be impacted by that, and I don't want to shift to somebody else who would be impacted, but is there an area that, really there are no homes currely?
We did review and analyze some alternative substation sites, including east of where we're proposing it right now. There were a lot of factors that ended up us landing on the site we are today. One being that we had a willing landowner to sell to us. Some of the other sites that we entertained didn't have a willing landowner to sell. And like I mentioned before, we always try to avoid condemnation. So when we had a willing landowner to sell the property that we needed for the site, that was another appealing aspect of that site. Also, the transmission lines are a key point to this project. If we build a substation site further east, we still have to get a transmission line to the Smoky Hill substation to tie those two together, as well as getting it over to the existing corridor. So we have two double circuit transmission lines that would need to come from a site further east. And in order to accommodate that with the type of growth that's out here, there wasn't the physical space to accommodate two lines. So that was another factor we ruled out, those alternative sites. We tried to locate those adjacent to the existing corridor as much as possible. That way it eliminates the need for the building of additional transmission line facilities. So like I mentioned, all the sites we looked at east were kind of parallel to the existing transmission line corridor. But those are basically the three main factors why we shifted our focus to the site we're in front of you today about.
Okay. The other one, and I believe I read in the documentation about the FAA and Buckley, but can you talk about that too? That was a concern that these lines are in the flight path of Buckley, and I think it was in there that is not a concern of the FAA, but would you talk about that, please?
Sure, I would be glad to. We did have, as part of our public outreach, we reached out to Buckley Air Force Base and spoke with them about the project. So they're well aware of what our plans are. And as far as the existing corridor goes, the structures that are out there right now are on the order of 100 to 150 feet in height, and the new line will accommodate that and be the same height. So they're aware of the existing line, and we approached them during our outreach to inform them of the addition of an additional line, and they didn't have any issues with that.
So because the line is the same height, that's not a concern
correct
to them. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're aware of the existing corridor, and the new line would be the comparable in height to what's out there right now. Anything within the flight path, we're required to approach the FAA and do what they call an obstruction evaluation. We'll be providing locations, the elevation where the structure's at, the height of the structure, and then we'll determine if, at that point, if there needs any kind of lighting associated with it, so that the Air Force folks are aware of it. But we're not in, any of the proposed poles that we have right now are not within that flight pattern.
And do the current poles have lights?
The current poles do not, no.
They do not. Okay. Prairie dogs. I'm not a big fan of prairie dogs. I think they're really destructive.
I'm sorry, if I could add a little bit more to the FAA issue or your question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just so you're aware, Danny Pearson.
State your name again, please.
Danny Pearson, Public Service Company. The existing line that we have in that corridor was evaluated by the FAA when we built the lines originally, because that line was built into Smoky Hill Sub and then built up Gun Club Road and up to Bar Lake Sub, which is essentially where the terminal for DIA is at this point in time. At that time, the FAA required us to add lights to a portion of our line going north of Smoky Hill Sub on Gun Club there. It jogs and goes east, and then we have another strip of towers that are lighted. So, yes, the FAA did determine in the 60s that portions of our existing lines did need to be lighted, but the portion that we have in question here are far enough off of the corridors that they were not needed to be lighted. They exceeded the glide path ratio and all of that in the 60s.
And are they, has that rule changed a little bit between, in terms of the new poles? Will they, in this area, have to be lighted, or?
No, they do not have to be lighted.
So they still have the same policy?
It's actually the FAA and Buckley were much more restrictive in the 60s than they presently are. If we were to build the line along Gun Club at this point in time, we would not have to light those. We lighted them at that point in time because of the concern.
I see. Okay. Commissioner Baker or... Sure. Okay, Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. So, are there currently lights on some of these? And will there be lights on some of the new ones?
There are currently lights on a portion of our double circuit line that goes north of Smoky Hill Sub along Gun Club Road.
And to
that
my
is
knowledge,
not part of this project.
To my knowledge, we haven't gotten complaints about that. So, it's not been a concern, because if you have lights then sometimes it shines into somebody's yard and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. But if you're not going to add lights, then we don't have that concern. Okay.
Okay. Good point. What we refer to the lights is it's a small bulb light that is red. You can see it for a great distance. There's not a lot of beams coming out. It doesn't really interfere with the homes that we have on the present light or on the present structures.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Okay. And let me, if I could, just finish with two questions that I had because I offended some people about prairie dogs. But can you talk about, I think that they do cause problems with landscaping and so what do you all do with your current substation and what mitigation would you have with the new substation as well as, I guess the easement is the same easement that you've had, but what could be done to help mitigate that? And the other question is really on the landscaping, that you've worked with other communities on landscaping, and I'd just like to know what has been done and what opportunities. And then I have one final question wasn't really, and that is the substation, a 14-foot berm. I'm not sure you can do better than that with a fence. And you're right, it'd have to be a pretty tall fence. So, but then there's landscaping around that, and that's hard to bring water to that area and that kind of thing. So how would you keep it alive and looking good if you did more than just the berm, but did landscaping as well? So, sorry, I got a lot on you there.
No, it's okay. I think I'll start at the beginning there. I think your issue had to do with prairie dogs in our substation sites. Is that correct?
Prairie dogs that are around the substations as well as, I think, in the easement area.
Correct. Most of the issues that we come up with the prairie dogs are within the right-of-way, the transmission line corridor. We don't seem to have an issue with them so much at our substation sites. If there was, we would... And if it was an issue that would negatively affect our facilities, we would go in and do the proper removal procedures to get them away from our facilities so they don't cause any damage to them. But like I said, most of it occurs in the transmission line corridor. And I think right now our practice is through our vegetation management, trying to keep those grasses somewhat taller, keeps them more localized. And prevent, especially along the perimeters where we have residences up against the corridor, we try to keep the grasses a little high there. That way, when they pop out of their holes, they typically don't move into the yards. So it's kind of a practice with our vegetation management right now to keep the prairie dogs kind of isolated to the corridor and keep them from going outside.
Okay.
I think your second question had to do with landscaping, in particular around the substation. Let me start off with the transmission line corridor. As you can see from the photo sim we did earlier, we don't have any vegetation in our transmission line corridor. And that's strictly, like I mentioned earlier, kind of a clearance issue for us. We can't afford any kind of vegetation to get up into our clearances that we have to maintain per the National Electric Safety Code. So we typically keep landscaping outside of our transmission line corridors. On certain occasions, we'll grant licenses like we did with Tollgate Crossing to go in and plant landscaping as long as it meets a certain type of species, and that they're on the hook to do the maintenance and ongoing to keep it alive, I guess. So around substations, we do typically, depending on the situation, plant some landscaping. And I think that's the condition number 5 that's tied to this approval, and I think we would be willing to entertain that as long as, I think the way the wording of the condition is, as long as it doesn't interfere with our facilities and is kind of in line with what our restrictions are as far as planting landscaping around our substations. So that would be definitely something we would entertain. Like I mentioned earlier, the trail with the Arapahoe County open space in between the substation and the residents, we would look at maybe incorporating some landscaping along that trail as well. And that would be something we'd work out with the open space district as far as maintenance of that. I think with water being such an issue out here, we would probably have to end up trucking water in to get them established and pick the right type of species that would, once it's established, would need minimal water or minimal maintenance. So that's something that we would work closely with open space with.
And that's currently, as I read it, that's currently a condition.
Correct.
If this goes forward, I think that's really important. And I know sometimes on some of these things that the landscape goes in and then it's not maintained and it dies and then it's not replaced and then it's kind of back to the original or it looks worse than it did before. So I think that's I think that the other part of the landscaping was my question about which I interpreted to mean that you worked with individual homeowners in Parker versus a district or something like that. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, and that's also something that we work a lot with in these type of areas where we have a transmission line in a residential kind of environment. We established a landscape fund with the town of Parker. Like they mentioned, it was to go towards those residents that back up to the corridor. Most of those residents in front of you today are City of Aurora residents, and I will kind of dovetail on what someone had mentioned before, that we are working with the City of Aurora on that to incorporate some of the same measures that we did in the town of Parker, including a landscape fund.
So that would be something that when you work with the City of Aurora, because these individuals are City of Aurora residents, that's something that you would go that route rather than with us in the county.
Correct, yeah. We've already started discussions with the city on this, and we'll continue to work with them through our application process to make sure that we satisfy their needs as well as the communities.
So they need to speak with their representatives in Aurora as that goes forward.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. I may have others, but Commissioner Baker and then Commissioner Conti.
Thank you. No, you asked some of the same questions that I was going to ask. Do you currently have an agreement with Tollgate Crossing HOA for maintenance of any of that land?
A portion of it, yes. And actually the license agreement was entered into with the developer at the time.
Okay.
So the developer is responsible for the maintenance of that landscaping and the trail that's through there.
Okay. And the only way our open spaces in your negotiation to allow maybe some kind of partnership with our open spaces for maintenance of any trail areas going through the corridor, that would only happen if this project goes through, if it's approved today, correct?
I think we would still entertain working with the open space folks on the trail, regardless of this project, if it is property that we own. I don't know about the landscaping aspect of it. We work with them on the trail, but I think with this case, with the comments we received from the landowners, we'd try to partner as well with the landscaping and the maintenance.
Thank you very much for that. Another clarification, more or less, is when you said you don't do any landscaping in the transmission line easement area, I think you're mostly, when you say that, you're referring to trees, high trees. That's what you're talking about. There are native grasses and scrubs, bush kind of things that grow there that you either cut down or mow, like you said, to prevent height and maybe the optimum for discouraging wildlife instead of prairie dogs, wildlife from making that their habitat. Okay. Any plans to modify the Smoky Hill substation? I know it may not be part of this project, but you've heard a lot of comment today that what we have is where what comes first, the chicken or the egg. In this case, the substation, the Smoky Hill substation, came before the housing, the residential, and it may have changed that neighborhood to a certain degree. Now that there are residents there, that may have been fine when there was nothing for miles around it. I just wanted to ask if there are any plans to maybe upgrade the Smoky Hill substation at all, in light of the fact that you're doing all this work right there. I know from being a facilities guy, the mobilization of contractors and things, you can save some money by possibly combining projects.
Yeah, at this time we don't have any plans to make any additional improvements at Smoky Hill substation. That's part of the reason for the Harvest Mile substation. Smoky Hill is at capacity. There's no more land around there for us to expand, hence the new substation at Harvest Mile. And we did do improvements to Smoky Hill substation back in, I believe, 2012, where we brought one of the lines in. And that, at that time, the case came before Arapahoe County, and that was the time, I think, in the place to ask for additional screening. We did install landscaping per those hearings, as well as a sound wall around one of the transformers to keep the sound levels down for the residents to the south. But yeah, that's a separate project, and as of right now, we don't have any plans to make any improvements there.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Mr. Jackson.
And I have one more, I think. You just mentioned the word that I was going to ask you about. It seems to me that we talked about sound when we talked about that substation. I don't remember how recently it was, but that was going to be my question. So it was my understanding that when the wind blows and the lines vibrate, they make a kind of a sound. And so then I was wondering, I have not heard from any of the neighbors that that's been a problem, but I was just wondering what happens if you get two of them vibrating at the same time, if that's going to create any kind of sound issues.
Yes, the transmission lines, they do inherently make some noise, in particular during wet conditions or when it's humid out. It's what we call corona. And the new line is going to be designed using low corona hardware to keep the noise levels down. And as I mentioned in the PUC process with the CPCN, they review levels of EMF and noise at the same time. And we met the state standards for noise as well, which is 50 dB at the edge of the property plus 25 feet. So with the existing line and the new line, we will be able to stay within those state statute guidelines of noise at the edge of the right-of-way.
Is the new line going to add levels of sound? I mean, when the two interact, will they increase, or will it be a canceling like with the EMF, or do we have any idea of what happens when you get two sets of lines vibrating at the same time?
I'm not aware of any noise cancellation, but I'll have to have our transmission in.
Yeah, we have our scientist here.
Danny Pearson again. Yes, with the additional lines, we will get additional noise on the side that we're putting the new lines onto. And the other side will change, not significantly, but they will change. But as with the magnetic fields, we can rotate and balance the phases so the noise can be kept to meet the state statutes of 50 dBA at the edge of our property plus 25 feet. So we do meet all of those guidelines that we are required to of the 50 dBA or less with these projects. So with the existing 230 lines, we're coming in with the 345 and the 230 line on the double circuit structure. So yes, the noise will increase, but it is still below the state statute. And I just should point that out, as Derek said, it's just typically during wet weather, rainy weather, misty, snowy, when there's a lot of moisture in the air is when the lines are the noisiest. Typical day-to-day operation of the line is around 25 dBA of our lines, which is about similar to a library setting. It's a little bit different noise, and that's why everybody hates our lines, because it's a different noise. But we've had people come in and they say, what'd you do to the line? It's much quieter now than it was before you put these new lines in. So we have improved the noise situation in some cases.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have one final question. Some of the individuals here, some of the residents, would prefer, and I don't know whether they would prefer after working with you, but possibly a wall or some kind of, I think we got this is the Hiawatha West Midtown substation picture here, but may prefer something like that versus a berm. Could be lower, like 10 feet versus 14. But would you be willing to work with the residents on something that is again, a barrier, something that mitigates the impacts that's not a berm? And have you ever talked to the residents there about options?
I think we would obviously prefer to go through with what we're proposing right now with the screening of the berm, as it's going to be able to screen more of the equipment than a wall would. I think that would be our preference at this point. And it's also a different type of setting. We keep talking about these other instances or other locations, and there's a lot behind that politically and planning-wise that is completely different than what we're dealing with here. Different surrounding, different environments, and working with your planning staff early on, we determined that the berm would provide more screening than a wall. It would also blend in better. A wall would attract more. It would stand out more than a berm. And like I mentioned before, the berm will actually provide more screening of the equipment inside the yard than a wall would.
I would personally say that, I don't know how you get to a 14-foot wall, so I agree with you on the berm and probably, I don't know, I've seen 12-foot walls, but really nothing more than that. So I think my question is really is working with the residents to make sure that any visual impacts are mitigated as much as possible. And if that means, the vegetation that you're going to work with individuals on their property or adjacent to their property, and then and that would be on the under the transmission line, but at the facility itself, I think the substation itself, I think making sure that that isn't initially or doesn't become an eyesore. I think that's really important, and I think it is, to the residents right in there, and I think Commissioner Baker said it well, that area is developing, and there are going to be more and more residents. Quincy will be widened, and I think that is a responsibility when you have a substation. And I've been involved with some things where brick walls were put around, and it was more in a existing residential. When they moved, it was more of an existing area. I understand that, but I think to look to the future, I think that would be important to make sure take into account residents' concerns, those residents today as well as residents in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. We definitely want to work with our customers and our neighbors, and I think along with the condition that's been pushed forward with the Planning Commission, we would like to possibly amend that to say that we would work on landscaping at the substation with input from the residents in Tollgate Crossing and the adjacent landowners, to make sure that we meet their needs and our needs are met as well, with the clearances and the type of vegetation we need planted there. To address your concern a little bit about the future, we're well aware of the expansion at Quincy Road. We have actually a distribution line on the south side of Quincy Road that we're going to have to relocate as part of that expansion of the road. So and then with the topography up on Quincy, you're actually going to be kind of looking over a hill, so you won't see as much of the substation as well from that point. The landowner that we worked with to purchase the substation site, which was Lowry, they are overseeing the development for the remainder of that parcel very, very closely. And that's one of the reasons they were willing to work with us, is they thought a substation was compatible with what they foresee being developed on the remainder of that parcel. We don't know at this time. The development hasn't been proposed or brought forth to Lowry, but they have certain guidelines that they have to keep in place. There's not going to be any residential development on that parcel.
So are they thinking maybe a strip center or something?
More along the line of commercial, retail, maybe other industrial uses. That all will depend when the developer approaches them and has to go through the land use review process.
So that makes me think a little bit, just to make sure that with the placement of the substation, to ensure that it is it's back to the visual impacts and mitigation of any negative, or I can't say any, but as much of the visual impact as possible, so as far away from the residents. I think placement on the property itself is critical as well.
Right, and that's, excuse me, we worked pretty close with Lowry on that process as well.
And not just from an ease of use for you all, but from the surrounding area as well. And it may take a little bit more effort, to do something like that. But I think it would be respectful of the neighbors to consider those things.
Sure, absolutely. And like I said, we definitely want to keep our relationship as well as we can, and that's why we propose maybe the amendment to condition number 5 to work with those folks on the proper balance for landscaping around the substation.
Okay. That's all I had.
Not with me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Any other questions?
That was any other questions? Okay. Seeing none. Commissioner Baker.
And not for the applicant. I may have some questions for Mr. Skinner and Mr. Hill on the wording of concessions, or not concessions, conditions. What I heard when Mr. Skinner made his initial presentation is that number 6, condition number 6, concerning the Excel agreeing to provide the same level of corridor improvements as that within the city of Aurora condition, because that hasn't been even heard by the city of Aurora to date. And it seems to me that maybe what the applicant is doing is asking for going from south to north as far as asking these different jurisdictions for approval. And it would, so condition number 6, are you suggesting it be totally stricken, Mr. Skinner?
That's an option. Condition 6 dealt more specifically, I believe the planning commissioner's intent was it was level of maintenance in the corridor. I don't know. I'm uncomfortable tying us as part of this will become, this language part of the resolution. It is recorded. It ties us to a position that we do not have a complete understanding of. But I do agree with the intent that we wanted to make sure the corridor was a contiguously, harmoniously maintained corridor without this type of maintenance here and then maybe less here and more there. So certainly open to any discussion on that.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Possibly rewording, I'm going to give you possibly rewording that condition to strike the city of Aurora jurisdiction as, say, within adjacent jurisdictions. That way, possibly using the Douglas, Parker, and Aurora, so there's consistency along the lines. Now, it does say level of corridor improvements and not maintenance, so that
needs to be changed.
Yes.
And just a suggestion, perhaps so if you're in the middle of two different jurisdictions, you may have two different situations. Perhaps the board would like to suggest that the sections in unincorporated Arapahoe County are maintained in a manner that is equal to or exceeds that of adjacent jurisdictions. That way you can tie yourself to the highest use on either end, highest standard. And I don't think that we've caused an undue burden because we're basing it off adjacencies that are potentially being agreed to somewhere else.
And it may not need to be exact. Consistency the word consistency does leave some room for unique, special circumstances from one topographical area, geographical area to another that are common sense kind of things. And were you also proposing any modifications to condition number 7?
I do not. That language was specifically crafted by the open space staff, and I would not personally or as the planning division propose a change to that. If they're still here, we could ask them. I mean, they were comfortable with it. They gave it to us. We could ask them real quick if they still like it. Options exist. That language is only a few days old, too, so it's new.
I'll defer to Madam Chair on that. If you want open spaces to reiterate that they're in favor of the language of condition number 7.
Yeah. I'm presuming you would be, but it's a good double check.
Roger Harvey with Open Spaces again. No, the language we drafted internally just a couple days ago, and so we're completely fine with that.
The one thing that I on 5. Excel will landscape the area around the substation to the extent possible. I'd like to beef that up.
Certainly.
So something that is more substantial landscaping. And I'm requirements that govern how landscaping will be placed. And I absolutely respect the fact that there are they can't exceed certain heights and that kind of thing, but what I'm looking for is not a tree here or a bush there, but something that is more substantive.
Oh.
And when you all work with them to ensure that happens. And the other thing is, and I don't know what we do about prairie dogs. Honestly, I don't know how.
Madam Chair?
In the prairie, we get rid of prairie. I mean, I know how we can get rid of them, but I understand that. But yes, Commissioner Conti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have been told that anything that limits their sight lines will cause them to curtail their own population growth. So the tall grasses, fences, even a hedge around the properties where they're known to be will, if they can't see, if they cannot see oncoming predators, they will have a tendency to limit their own population growth. And I have been told that is a very effective way to do that from people who are in the business of knowing about these things.
I think considering they have an impact on landscaping and substantial investments in landscaping by the Metro District and by homeowners. Again, I don't know how we do that, but in some sort of a plan that you all can work out to try to mitigate that population there. Sure.
Roger Harvey again with Open Spaces. So I've been doing natural resource management for 20 years on the Front Range, and so I did notice you have a condition for a noxious weed management plan. So that's basically a natural resource noxious weed management plan. I've been doing them extensively for years, and any good weed management plan is going to address prairie dogs. Prairie dogs affect your vegetation, and overpopulation of prairie dogs will cause immense impacts to increase your noxious weeds. And so basically, I think it goes back to a lot of what I think you were talking about, another condition with Aurora. If Excel follows their weed management plan, they'll be managing the resource in a positive way to promote native grasses, native vegetation, and reduce wildlife and effects that are going to impact and cause more noxious weeds. So I think that's one that really, it doesn't really say that in there, but you have to have that knowledge of understanding what weed management plans say. If it's a well-written, good one, and they follow it well over the years, then that will dictate how they manage that resource and the vegetation.
And I would ask you all work with them to develop that kind of a plan.
Yeah, I think it was made by, we have a weed management specialist might have been asked for that. So, we do work with him for these things. So, if that makes sense, if you have any questions on that.
Anything else? Okay. Mr. Baker. Commissioner Baker.
Mr. Hill, do you have a suggested language for the revision of I do. Condition? Number 6. Thank you. Okay. In the case of ASI 16-004, Pawnee Daniels Park 345K transmission line and substation 1041 permit, I have read the staff report and received testimony at the public hearing. I agree with the Planning Commission recommendation and staff findings for the application, including all plans and attachments as set forth in the staff report dated April 27, 2017. I hereby move to approve the request, subject to the following conditions. 1. Prior to signature of the final copy of these plans, the applicant agrees to address Public Works staff comments and concerns. 2. Damage to county roads created by the applicant's construction equipment will be repaired to the pre-construction condition following construction. 3. All necessary utility easements or transmission rights of way must be recorded and executed prior to construction of the transmission line. 4. The applicant will need to create a noxious weed management plan and follow the plan in order to deal with noxious weeds. The applicant will provide the county with a copy of the noxious weed management plan. 5. Excel will landscape the area around the subdivision to the extent possible with respect to requirements that govern what and how landscape materials can be placed in transmission line corridors. 6. Corridor improvements are to be maintained at a level that is equal to or exceeds the requirements of adjacent jurisdictions through which the line corridor runs. 7. Excel agrees to enter into a license or easement agreement with Arapahoe County for a public multi-use trail through Excel's property that extends from Gun Club Road on the west to Harvest Road on the east. The trail shall be a 10-foot wide hard surface trail, and the location and corridor width shall be agreed upon by Excel and Arapahoe County Open Spaces within 2 years of this date. The trail will be designed, permitted, constructed, and maintained by Arapahoe County Open Spaces.
You have a second? Second. Thank you. Commissioner Conti, motion made by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Conti. Any further comments, questions? Okay. Comments? Commissioner Baker?
First of all, I wanted to let everybody here know that this is a difficult decision. Anytime we impact the area around somebody's home, their castle, it's a difficult decision for us, and we take it seriously. I want you to know that we heard your comments here today. I'm making this motion, and I will vote to support this motion because of a number of different things. Number one, I'm going to talk about property owners' rights again. If somebody owns land and wants to do something with it, and they've followed the rules that we've set up previously in the county to meet those requirements, and they meet or exceed those requirements, then that, and gone through the planning process, the Planning Commission has approved those, and our planning staff, who are the experts in this area of land use, and recommend approval, it weighs a lot with us. If we were to deny this and ask Excel to move it and make it someone else's problem, we've been accused of kicking the can down the road many times before, and that's what that would be. When that new location came up, we'd have a room full of people opposing that at that time as well. We cannot tell them where to move the site to. We can deny this petition, but we can't tell them where to. I'm concerned with the any denial of this application would have implications on connectivity. We're the middle section between Douglas and Parker and Aurora. I want to say thank you to Excel on their stance on condemnation. I find that that stance admirable. I understand why underground access, burying these transmission lines underneath. I'm a facilities guy. It's hard enough to get to make repairs on wires in your house, let alone wires such as this when they're buried. So I understand that. I would continue to urge our planning department to not to work with Excel and the HOA, the various neighbors, and make sure that they know that there may be a minimum standard here, but you can exceed that minimum standard. And what is to the better for all concerned, there is a happy medium, and I hope we can find that. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll just add that I do think that the mitigation of impacts is really important, and I think both the county and hopefully Aurora and Excel will all be on the same page about how important this is and be listening to the residents and how to minimize the impacts of and I think a lot of it can be done with good quality landscaping, and not only not only for the substation, but as for the residents as well, and that really applies to Aurora. But I think we need to make sure that we're following up and that it doesn't just look good when it's first developed, that it continues to be maintained. And if not, we need to be coming back to Excel and you all hold us accountable as well for ensuring that that an area is maintained according to what was approved, if it's approved here today. So those are my only comments. So why don't we do a roll call? Oops.
Just before the vote, in condition 5, when that was read out, the word subdivision was substituted for the word substation. Just want to correct it before your vote.
On the substation rather than subdivision.
I will modify my motion for approval to make that modification, that change to condition number 5, substation removed and the word, or, I'm sorry.
Condition 5 should use the word substation and not the word subdivision as originally stated.
I'm sorry. That's my mistake.
No problem.
So that is substation is appropriate to be used instead of subdivision. Thank you.
Is that acceptable to you, Commissioner Conti? Okay. All right. We'll do a...
Commissioner Jackson? Commissioner Holland is absent and excused. Commissioner Conti?
Yes.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes. And thank you. Thank you again for being here today. Okay, are there any closing commissioner comments? Okay, seeing none, meeting is adjourned. Well, I hope we don't have...
Okay, thank you so much. And you'll probably help me for all right. Interesting. What up, dude? Sorry, while you're going on. I mean, you're kind of. Don't worry. I'm still in my 20s, so I gotta. All I need to do
Thank you very much. I'm a jack of master. Very much. You worry about the